This could be.
I am confused.
Well, for useless knowledge that no one cares about, in Phoenix, because it's so hot, it's a dense heat core, right? It's a dense urban core, and it has the heat island effect. So what happens with storms is storms will come in from either the north, south, east, or west, and then it'll separate around Phoenix because it's too hot for the storms to hit, and then it passes over. So when we get rain, it's a really big deal because like it's normally like it's too hot for us to get out there.
Okay. I am going to pull up here.
And we'll get started here in just a few minutes. Give a few minutes to join. Adam, glad you're here. And Kim Minori, excited to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Yep, thanks.
If we were a voting body, we definitely do not have quorum. So we will give folks a few more minutes to join.
All good.
Sorry, Adam, do you remember the question you posed to Chief Duvall about the military equipment?
No. When did we pose that question? Recently?
No, it was several sessions ago. I was just trying to remember what specifically you had asked him about, whether or not it was like tactical gear or something else.
I don't remember. Sorry. This is related to kind of like the federal funds that usually go to law enforcement agencies.
Yeah.
I thought Ajmal asked about that, and I thought they responded that they didn't take any of that gear, but it was my understanding, and anybody can correct me if I'm wrong, that they do have tactical gear like SWAT gear.
Okay. Is Ajmal on yet?
Yeah, that was my recollection too, what Jumana just said. So.
Also, Michael and Jevin and Jamal and everybody, I tried to respond to what you all sent out this morning a couple of times, and it kept coming back to me saying it was rejected by everybody's email. So either you're all tired of hearing from me, or there's some kind of a glitch. You could have done it in a nicer way. I'm just saying.
Not
There's
at
a couple
all.
of spaces.
That wasn't subtle at all.
Jumana, for what it's worth, Michael has my number blocked too, so it's okay.
So I'm in good company. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, so I don't know how to send it to anybody, but it got roundly rejected from everybody's email a couple of times. So I gave up on sending it.
We were supposed to be done already, so you guys have already like blocked us all. So
apparently,
that's what it is.
no, but I'm talking about Chief Duvall, Mayor Stewart, like everybody's email rejected it. They're about to move me out of Takoma Park or something. I don't know.
Well, Jumana, we'll pull up the document. Adam and Kim Minori have sent a few edits today, which I've incorporated. If you want to just incorporate yours in real time, or if I can give you a Gmail or something, if that would be helpful, whatever's easiest for you.
Gmail will be great.
Or you can try sending this to us directly. Send it to Michael or myself directly in Zoom.
That can work as well.
Do you want me to put it in the chat, or what do you want me to do?
No, is it a document or an email with
It's
thoughts?
not a document. It's an
Okay.
email where I pulled out some pieces where I didn't think it was quite accurate.
Perfect.
Or at least not to my recollection. Do you want me to put that in the chat?
If it's easy to, go ahead, and otherwise I'm dropping you a Gmail account right now that you can send it to, and I'll pull it up. And that way I'll have it as we're going through this. But please, as we're scrolling through it, anywhere that you think edits need to be made, we'll do that together.
All right, I'll just send it to the Gmail then.
Perfect.
Then it maybe won't lose its whatever.
Don't laugh at my Gmail address, Jumana. I got it in college, and I was Mikey back then. So don't laugh at it, okay?
But can we call you Mikey now?
I'm home visiting
Is that-
family, and that's all I'm known as here. So
If it makes you feel better, I'm known as Gigi in my family. Even
go.
my parents who named me never used my actual name. So,
Exactly.
you
My
know,
dad was a Michael too, so it was Mikey all the way through. Like growing up, the yearbook says it. Then I got to college and it was Mikey. And I got my first job and it said Mikey Aiken, staff assistant. And then I got promoted to director of community affairs at a university. And my business cards came in and they said, Michael P. Aiken, director. And I went to my boss and I said, that's not my name. And he said, it is now and it's time. And I said, okay, sir, I will make the change. It worked.
And on
yeah,
that
well,
note, we're going to get started.
Go for it, Jeff.
Well, Jemana, go ahead. I'll let you close out. We still got to give folks a few more. We don't have anything.
I was going to say, mine was a lot more basic. My parents just thought that Jumana was too big a name for a little kid and also thought that Gigi would be easier for Americans. And so that was that.
Got it.
See, I like we were saying earlier to Michael and G-Day, like, what are we going to do on our Tuesday nights? We spent like the last 16 Tuesdays together, and I don't know what we're going to do from here on out. You know, we got to.
I got lots of ideas. Y'all need better lives.
Oh, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. We're going to get started here. We're going to give folks a few more minutes, but as we get things kicked off of what we have, this is our last, so it is 5:38 p.m. on July 8th. Welcome to the Thursday edition of the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force, friends. Today we're going to spend time putting the bow on the gift that we've pulled together over the last few months. And so we are going to today have a discussion around the outstanding items. Michael's going to lead us through that. And then we're going to finalize our recommendations. Then we're going to talk briefly about the report. And from there, we will close out the meeting tonight talking about the city council presentation, the special meeting that we'll have on the 13th. As you know, today is the last formal session that we have with one another. It has been an honor and an absolute pleasure to work with you all, and we're grateful for this opportunity and experience. Tuesday, we will have a special council meeting with the special council working meeting, with the full city council, mayor, and the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force. Jamal will lead us through a discussion a little bit later to talk about the details of that. We're going to use this meeting today to bring together our recommendations, and then we will turn that around and disseminate that to you all via email following this meeting when we have a final report for each of us to review and go over. But at this time, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Michael, to get the plane in the air and to kick off our next conversation.
Let me screen share here. Let me make sure I've got the right document up. So this document here is exactly the same one you all got last night. I've updated it with the comments we received today so that it all lives in one place. Not planning to do the line by line review that we've done the last 2 or 3 times we've been together, but it's our last time together, and I'd prefer that we have the discussion here versus email after the meeting, as the council is expecting a final to be transmitted by end of business tomorrow. So please jump in wherever needed. I also sent around a track change document that I know is nearly impossible to read at this point, but it was really important that everyone saw exactly where these things go. I've gotten some really good feedback on this today, that it's a lot easier to read, which is good. So let me jump in here. I want to focus as much as we can our time on those parts where it doesn't seem like there's uniform agreement on the task force, just to make sure we're capturing the differing positions in whatever way the task force best wants that. So the topic areas was simply an organizational effort to make this read a little bit clearer. Scrolling down here, Adam added in some language that he believed that Kiminori had asked for. Kiminori wrote back and said that worked for him, but it adds into section B of the task force. This should include the creation of accessible communication channels, possibly through the establishment of volunteer liaison positions to represent specific wards, neighborhoods, and interest groups, such as multifamily housing units, business owners, youth, LGBTQ, and people with physical impairments. Any thoughts on this? Dwayne, I see your hand, sir.
Yeah, just some wordsmithing. That last part, youth, LGBTQ, and people with, it should be physical disabilities. That's the term that we that is used.
Got it. Any other changes there?
Language access, I don't see in there.
Yep. Such as multifamily. What's the right way to say that, Jumana? People with language access needs?
I don't know. Dwayne probably knows a better way to say that than I do,
Go
but
ahead, Dwayne.
that's
What are you trying to, I didn't hear that last part. What did you say, Jumana? You're trying to say what?
It doesn't address language access.
Oh,
So we have a lot of languages that people speak in Takoma Park.
Give me a minute to think through that one. And just going back to it, I hate to go back to it. It should be individuals with physical disabilities.
Yeah.
Or just individuals with disabilities, because there are many types of disabilities. Physical is just one of them. So.
Yep.
And then back to language access. Just give me a second to think. We could keep moving, and then if I come back to it with a better.
Sorry, put you on the spot.
Yeah, we'll certainly come back to this one. So in Dwayne, if you just want to drop it into the chat, if that's helpful as well, I will copy and paste it here so that you're free to just kind of play with it and send it back, and we'll drop it back in. Scrolling down here, and Jumana, I don't have your email yet, and I'm sharing screen here. So if there's something in here that you think is not stated correctly, just stop me at any point and make sure I'm getting everything here. New departments and functions. Let me stop here for 1 second. There was some back and forth among some task force members, and if new was the right word there, or reallocated or redesigned or reorganized. It remained new departments and functions, because that's kind of what we're talking about, are some new functions. But if anyone wants the word not to be new and to be reorganized, I have no problem with that. Just let me know. Keep going down. This is the community safety team, articulated what that is, dropped in the mediation citation that was provided.
Sorry, Michael.
Please.
I thought that section 2 was going to just be merged into that broader section 3 as like part of that group or department, whatever you want to call it.
Yep. G-Day, I had the same thought when I was editing this. I didn't do that because I didn't want to stray from the intent here, but it seems like we're saying all of these functions should live outside of the police force, and they might be organized this way. Do we want to kind of say, you know, a community assistance office that would include things like a community safety team and neighborhood services division, or do we want to keep those as separate recommendations? I'd love some thoughts on that. Ajmal, I see your hand.
I don't feel strongly. I think that we could, it's late in the day, so we could just include a line at the end of each one saying that, you know, that could be combined with the other or a subcomponent of the other.
Yep. We'll need further development. We'll need further development. Could be all part of one function / office or separate. I'll play with that language a little bit, but is that the idea that we say, here's what needs to be accomplished? The organizational structure needs some further refinement. Does that sound right? Dwayne, is your hand back up, sir, or was that up from before? Sorry. You're on mute. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's not back up. Let me lower it.
Nope, you're all
looking
set.
at that other language. Thanks.
Thank you. So where did we land on that? Subsume it in, or just add a line that the organization of these should be part of further discussion? Any strong preferences? The one argument towards keeping them separate is neighborhood services division is currently a function within the police force. So this is saying like all the stuff they do shouldn't live within the police force. So that might be important enough to call out so folks know we're talking about that team in addition to these other things. Does that sound right? Let me know if you have any strong feelings on that, and we can come back to that one. I like neighborhood services as part of the community assistance office. Yep. Okay. So what I will do on this one is I'm going to say incorporate into number 3. So none of the words will change here. It'll just be added in as a sub-bullet, very similar to how the community safety team is a sub-bullet under the community assistance office. Okay. Kim and Ori added a couple citations that were asked for about, continued investments made in enhanced training around crisis intervention and specialized models. There were some questions on, are there models of that out there? I can drop these into the chat so that folks have an ability to look at them. But Kim and Ori, anything you want to add about why these 2 citations for the footnote?
Yeah, I think just, Chief kind of keeps saying something like advanced, de-escalation training or something like that. And I was just not sure exactly if it's the same as, the CIT training. So I added that. And then, yeah, I also want to keep that correspondent model as an option there as well.
Okay. It helps provide some clarity so that it can't be misinterpreted. Adam, you're absolutely right. Some of the footnotes were big instead of small. It was a late night Word formatting challenge, but we'll get all of those updated. This will go through a full quality control before anything's published, not to change any words, but just to make sure grammar and formatting and everything is updated in a document that's been extensively worked on. I'm going to go down here. So Kim and Ori, you asked here in the part where we've kind of consolidated that additional staffing resources might be needed around a city resource coordinator, a housing community development, and then I tried to capture the witness coordinator based on the notes from our last meeting and where that should or should not live. Under the housing and community development, Kim and Ori said, should we add this as a good place to include landlord-tenant issues and possibly working with the Takoma Park Commission on landlord-tenant affairs as a footnote? Any objections to that? So including a social worker or workers to respond to housing conditions and safety issues, landlord-tenant issues. So we would just add that as an example. Any issues with that? Otherwise, I'm going to add it here. Perfect. And then Kim and Ori, I can just drop the citation in as a footnote.
Can you go back?
Please.
So I think it was yesterday. We sent an email. I thought it was to everyone, but maybe just to the Link team about the 24/7 crisis center in Montgomery County. And I think you guys added that as a sort of
right here
footnote, and it kind of, elaborated. So make sure that everyone knows that it's been added.
Yep, it is. It's here. I just need to figure out where the footnote is that it responds to. The task force understands that the Montgomery County Crisis Center now offers a 24/7 hotline. We did call the hotline and speak with them to confirm that. Additional research and coordination are needed on how this hotline would work with local Takoma Park efforts to enhance crisis response. But the goal is to ensure that Takoma Park residents have a 24/7 way to request non-police led response. And then we dropped in the reference material of what the 24-hour crisis center is down below. Are we getting that correct?
Yeah, it's fine with me, but just make sure that everyone knows that.
Got it. So we updated that one. Jumana and others. I want to make sure this one is phrased correctly because I was basing it off 3 different versions of live notes from the meeting. So we said exploring if the victim witness coordinator position should be one role as it currently is or separated into 2 different functions. Whereas it can make sense for a witness coordinator to be housed within Takoma Park PD, there's also good reason for the victim's advocate to be housed outside of the department, possibly in the new proposed community assistance office. Is that a fair summary of the discussion, or are there any tweaks needed to that? Michael, I know you weighed in on this one as well. Jumana, go ahead.
Well, to me, and I had mentioned I'd missed the meeting where she spoke, is not clear if their victim coordinator person is also supposed to be a victim's advocate. But if it's true that she is, or he is, I think it was a she that in the particular position now, my recommendation, those things should not be the same position. And it was also my impression that the person in the role was already overwhelmed with doing the role on her own.
Yep.
And so that would be my distinction. I don't know that this is a victim coordinator or a victim witness coordinator, or like how the position is structured. But if there's some intentionality to this position that the person is also supposed to be the victim's advocate, then no, I do not believe these roles belong together.
Yep.
So it's not like, should it be one role or two? If it is meant to serve both those purposes, at least for me, it should be two roles and stated clearly.
Yep. For task force members who were on that meeting, anyone want to provide any clarity around that? We can easily move this from exploring to an actual recommendation. And team, help me on this. Victim-witness coordinator is how it's referred to in Takoma Park, right? Like we pulled that from their documents.
Yep.
Tell me if I'm getting that wrong, Jamal.
Yep, the official title is victim/witness coordinator, and it's even posted throughout the website as that.
Then I think it should, the two roles should be separated out.
Perfect. Michael, I saw your comment that you agree here. Let's do a little bit of editing together on this. So we can say the victim witness coordinator position should be two roles versus a combined role as it is currently. Yes, Adam, that is a great footnote. And if anyone wants to just draft that language, I can drop it in. Should be two roles versus a combined role as it is now. Where do we want to put here? Is it, so when I think the chief said, and correct me, it's all jumbling together. I think the chief said that the witness coordination function made a lot of sense to house within the police department so that they could coordinate around witness stuff. But he also, he was defensive around the position as a whole, but I don't think he had big objections to witness coordinating be elsewhere, but I want to make sure that's a fair statement. Do we believe that it can make sense for the witness coordinator to stay within Takoma Park, but then we think there should be a victim's advocate, which is a specific role that needs to be housed elsewhere? Is that the recommendation? The victim's advocate, there isn't a victim's advocate currently, so we'll say a victim's advocate should be housed outside of the police department, possibly in the proposed new community assistance office. Jumana?
No, I just left my hand up, but I agree.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. Great, Adam, does this do what a footnote would do? Because we kind of say it makes sense, but we don't really give the justification. So I think it does need a footnote. Team, I'm going to move on to the next one, but if someone can take a shot at a footnote there that captures this, we will go back and drop it in. Going back to part B, thank you, Dwayne. I appreciate that. Let's just go up and make that change right now. Individual is proficient. So I'm just going to add it to the list at the end, Dwayne. Does that work?
Yep, that's perfect.
Thank you. Does that work? Awesome. Okay, going down here, we've talked about this. Where did we end before? Okay, we've talked about that one. We've talked about the footnotes. We've added all of this. Okay, right here, victims witness coordinator. So this is good. We just got to come back and add a footnote. My team, I'm looking to you to help with that. So if you can drop in some stuff into the text so we can get some agreement, we will put that together. Communications here, scrolling through. So Kiminori, you asked, it's a good question. So should this be incorporated into 1E? So just so everyone knows what Kiminori is mentioning, if you go all the way up to the top, sorry, I'm not trying to make you dizzy. 1E There was a lot of stuff throughout the rest of the document where the comments were, this should be part of what the ongoing task force looks for, and this was one of them. So the task force should review police budgets, all police-related legislation, et cetera, et cetera. So kind of playing some of that awareness and oversight type role. Kim Inori's question down here is, should we take this section and include it in that, or leave it in communications? And the specific thing here was, there was a recommendation that the city website and social media needs to promote any increases in funding for police at least 30 days before the budget is voted on. I left it separate because it seemed like that was a very specific recommendation, but no objection to moving it if that's the will of the group. Ajamel?
So, I mean, look, I mean, all of this stuff, we're really sort of hassling over really small points. I think that all that said, I think I lean towards it being separate, because I think that the task force will have a role in reviewing all this stuff, but I think it's a separate and individual goal to make sure that it's being publicized widely. And so I think if it's put with the other one, there's slightly more danger that it gets swallowed up as part of the creation of a task force, as opposed to an individual requirement that the stuff is widely put out there.
Yep. Michael?
Hang on, I'll have to come back. I got to go open the door for somebody down here at the office.
Got it. I have a similar thought. This seems like a specific enough recommendation. We also heard in some of the focus groups and some of the community feedback that there was a concern that people were missing police increases because they weren't promoted and they didn't have time to weigh in. So I think this responds a bit to that unique need. So is that one okay to leave where it is? Okay. Welcome back, Michael. Did you want to add something on this one?
No, I mean, the thing is that, I'm a little frustrated by is I feel like, we talk about increases to the police budget, but we nowhere ever really talk seriously about decreases. And I did a little research today. I looked at police budgets in 10 different jurisdictions, and Takoma Park is actually the most expensive other than the MPD in Washington, DC in the whole region. And I kind of feel like we're not doing a service to, at least we have to make it as a recommendation for the next task force to look seriously at that, because I'm kind of, I was kind of shocked. Montgomery County provides policing 56% more cheaply on a per capita basis than Takoma Park does. I mean, as a taxpayer in Takoma Park, I would just say, let's get rid of the Takoma Park Police Department and just have Montgomery County do it. They do it on a more cost-effective basis. That's like $3.7 million we would save, or whatever it is. It's like, so I kind of feel like we're not doing a service if we don't deal with that issue. And there needs to be much more. And I felt like the chief got defensive every time we pushed a little bit about cost. And I think we do our community a disservice by not putting that out there, that we pay a premium for this police service. It's not even on par with other ones. I mean, you look at other jurisdictions and they have much higher numbers of level 1 crime, and they're doing it with fewer officers and at a lower cost. So it's like, I don't know. I just pretty frustrated by that.
I hear that, Michael. On this one, and other folks weigh in on this one specifically, is there any magic to it saying increases? Can it be changes, or can we say increases or decreases, so that we don't just assume that there's increases going forward? I saw Jide and Ajamel come off mute, so if either of you want to jump in.
I think the language is fine. Ajamel, I think it's your language if you want to change it.
I don't feel strongly about it. I'm fine either way.
I like changes to the budget. I thought that was a good solution.
Yep. It's also, it defaults to more transparency. If there are changes proposed, they should be noticed and we should be talking about them. This is one that stayed in there from the very first draft, and we've gone back and forth, and if there's a link or there's not a link and all of that. There was a question on, should we just drop this into the bullet below, because housing is part of public safety. I think that's a rational thought. The other thought here is that there was a real attempt to call out housing as a specific part of public safety. You'll see in the footnote here that housing code violations are searchable. that was kind of the city's position as well. That stuff is already here. What I took the task force to be asking for is the impetus shouldn't be on a resident to go find Montgomery County, search for a specific address. Takoma Park should be publishing an annual report of violations around housing safety. Am I getting that one correctly? Do we want to leave it here or do we want to move it? Michael, I see your hand up. Or was that from before? Sorry.
Sorry about that. That's before.
Anyone have a strong feeling on this one? Leave it where it is or drop it into 14?
I'm fine leaving it where it is. I think one of the big complaints or what have you in the most of the focus groups was around housing and kind of poor services provided. So
excellent. Everyone good with that? Corey from my team, who I don't believe is on screen, but is listening as an attendee, make sure you get Dwayne's chat comment, please, as you QC this so that we get that update around, oh, you might not be able to see this. When you go back through the document to finalize it, make sure you change anything that says physical disabilities to individuals with disabilities. We will absolutely do that.
I got it, Michael. Thank you.
Perfect. Kiminori?
Yeah, I'm, it's not like I'm trying to, consolidate all of this. I just noticed something and I don't mind separating, keep them separate. But in a sense that the housing issues are kind of scattered throughout the, different recommendations and kind of missing that focus. But maybe at this point, maybe that's where they are.
Okay. And your comments have been extraordinarily helpful throughout. So thank you for pointing these out, such as these ones where you caught some spelling errors, etc. Perfect public safety data. How about linking this footnote to 14D about open data portals? I don't have 14D up, but I can find it down here. Should these be merged? So this section here, I just want to make sure
it was not even a live link. I mean, the footnote, I think. So
what should this footnote be?
So it should be not the next one, but the one after that, I think.
This one? Oh, you're suggesting moving this to a footnote?
Oh, no. Connect that footnote to that D, I guess.
Connect footnote 6 to D. Got it. Not here. Got it. Okay. I can do that. There. Perfect. Thank you. And I'll go back and fix the numbering, but okay, because we're missing 6 now. So team, just make sure we update that one as well. Perfect. And then this one is talking about, should we merge these? Should it seem like they were overly wordy? And so I see Kiminori, you said that we could remove C. Is that correct here?
Right. I think D is kind of meant to be more comprehensive. So I added that dispatch, call for service data, as well as crime, traffic, arrest, everything. So
yeah, got it. Okay. This one here. So this is an interesting one. I kept this one separate for a reason, and let's see if this makes sense or not. So we have a lot of stuff up in 10C about dispatch and how to get services, etc. So this is talking about improving the structure and content of the city police department websites, including things like FAQs and others. I think there's a strong argument to be made that this could just fit up in there, that on the website, there should also be things like that. What I thought the task force was getting at is that the city should be making a concerted effort to help people with that distinction. But let me know if this should be subsumed up there or if it should stay separate. No strong preference on that one. I think some of these get stronger by calling them out separately, but some of them are easy to read when they're consolidated. So anyone have a feeling on Kiminori's comment there?
I think there's 2 separate points just kind of merged into this one. That's what I was kind of feeling. When to call 911, when not to, like there's with some examples, that kind of, educational page would be useful in general, because people probably just get confused, like, oh, should I call 911 here in this situation or not, right? But the other issue is if you're establishing like a new hotline or new number for certain things, there'll be like more explicit like outreach and educational, programs to make sure that the people know those new numbers and functions.
So instead of clarify and inform, what if we updated this to educate? Educate around when calling 911 is most appropriate and when options of alternative hotline should be used. So that's our goal. And this gets back to extensive dialogue around how we're all conditioned just to dial 911. And part of how you combat that is changing the conditioning in addition to training and additional hotlines. So I thought the meat of this recommendation was that last part, that the city should promote community engagement and outreach to increase awareness in the use of the new number or process. So if we change clarify and inform to educate around, does that work?
Yeah, that's fine. And then should this be part of that establishing a new hotline or new 24/7 line, or it should be separate? I don't know how
the
that's
reason
structured.
it was separate here is because it's part of the communications recommendation of here are the things the city better around communication. That's why that one was separated out. It seems like a communications campaign and an education campaign, which is why.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
Perfect. Thank you. That is really helpful. So I'm going to delete that. We've updated that and we've updated that. Okay. Making really good progress here. So Adam, we needed a goal for speed cameras. You proposed one, just wanted to show it to the group. Develop speed camera policies that appropriately balance the need for traffic safety and for assuring that civil fines do not unfairly burden those of limited finance needs. Everyone okay with that? I'm accepting it. Let me know if anyone has any thoughts. It was just we were missing a goal for the speed camera recommendation. So any tweaks to that, let me know. This is the first one where the drafts that we had received had a majority split. This is a process we're gonna have to follow for a few of these here. Ajamel, before I jump into that, go ahead.
Just a language tweak.
Yep.
Whereby if an individual's income falls below a certain percentage of the federal poverty limit, the way it currently reads, it implies that the individual's income has to be less than the federal poverty limit. I think that's the way that I read it right now. I know that's not what was intended. And by that, I mean, I know that's not what you intended when you revised it.
Yeah.
So is there somewhere we can say it where we can say if an individual's income falls below, I mean, I think we could just say a certain amount, they're fined for speeding tickets. I think that's the way it should just be a certain amount.
Yeah.
Because I think
really
phrased the other way, it implies something that wasn't intended.
Yep. Thank you. And for those who followed the multiple rounds, the initial recommendation had like 300%. There was some back and forth on if it should be, 125 or 150. And then where it was left is, let's say we want to do this, we embrace this, and then here are some guidelines around how it's done in other programs in other cities. So I think this accomplishes that. But let me know if there's anything else here. Okay, this part here. And so it seemed like everyone was fine with that. And then the second part of this recommendation initially from the subcommittee was prohibiting the establishment of additional speed camera zones. And that's kind of one piece. And then there was another argument that, well, maybe we don't want to go as far as prohibiting, not everyone want to go as far as prohibiting, but we would like to limit the establishment of new speed zones to areas with high rates of traffic accidents. It is completely fine to have both of these in, or we can say we're actually unified around this. I just want to get a sense of, are we splitting this into two recommendations? And on these where there's a split, do we want to go as far as to take kind of a vote in a sense of the group to say more of us felt this, but this was also a really valid one? Or do we want to lay out two different positions? Walk me through that and we will follow that process for the rest of today. So I saw Ajamel, Jumana, and Jide.
So my thinking on this is evolving. I think I still care a lot more about the poverty exemption. I think that I feel a lot stronger that we actually put in a certain amount that the poverty exemption should apply to. So in the spirit of legislative compromise, I'm happy to give up my absolute prohibition on speed camera zones if we can put in if the recommendation can be if somebody's household income is 200% of the federal poverty limit, that they're exempt from paying speed camera fines. I care a lot more about that than I do about the prohibition of additional zones, but that's just me.
Nope, I appreciate that. And just for additional clarity on this, some of the back and forth on this before was, is it an absolute exemption that you hit this poverty line and then it's zero, or is it geared down to you're paying a lower percentage based on income to still have some sort of you shouldn't speed type
Sure.
of
I saw that, and I've worked with these poverty exemption programs.
Yep.
Not easy to get a poverty exemption. You have to round up your income taxes and then bring other data in and prove that you're allowed to get the poverty exemption. And so there's still going to be a disincentive because it's going to be a hassle to be able to get the poverty exemption. You don't need to punish an individual by sort of imposing a monetary penalty to make it a disincentive.
Got it.
Says he surrendered.
I'm going to go to Jumana and then Jide, and we'll come back to this. Go ahead, Jumana.
So I think for me, and I totally agree with that, what Ejma just said in terms of just zeroing it out, because it is a lot that someone has to go through. But on the question of limiting the establishment of new speed camera zones to areas with high rates of traffic accidents, I think if that is going in, there needs to be a component that says that will be, like the case will be made, it will be discussed in a public forum and the community informed and have the ability to weigh in. Because you just don't want it. So they said, oh, but there's a lot of accidents here. There's a high rate of traffic here. So we're just going to put it there. Like there needs to be a public component to that discussion.
Yep. So what you're proposing here is if it's limit the establishment of new speed zone cameras to areas with high rates of traffic accidents, and in a way where public engagement around that decision it's not the right words, but you're adding a public engagement expectation to any decisions like that.
Well, a public notice and engagement, right? So they are saying we want to add it here. Here is our, evidence as to why this is a high traffic area, or this is, high accident area, or whatever it is. And then allow for community engagement.
Got it. Jide, I'm going to get all comments in, and then we can figure out are we coalescing around one recommendation, or are we separating? Jide?
Yeah, so I'd like to strike this out altogether. I think Anjamal is right. The poverty exemption to me is the most important bit. And from my perspective, the ability to put up speed cameras with a poverty exemption decreases the likelihood of a police officer needing to stop somebody from speeding. And if the purpose is about public safety and to minimize the number of stops or what have you, then the speed camera discourages speeding and discourages the likelihood in my mind of an officer having to stop somebody for speeding.
Got it. I have a compromise verbiage that's living in my head, but if we're moving towards striking or adding, I want to be irrelevant in this actual recommendation. But what we could do is say the addition of any future speed zone cameras should be the subject of publicly noticed and extensive community engagement, with a focus on limiting them to cameras with high rates of traffic accidents. So it sets an expectation around what happens if these are proposed in the future versus an all-out prohibition. That seems to capture what everyone was saying, but give me a sense of the group here. And while you're thinking about that, I want to go up here to, thank you, Ajmal. I want to go up here. So I just want to make sure I'm getting this right. Can we say it like this, Ajmal? Whereas by an individual's income falls below a certain amount, can we say proposed to be 150% of the federal poverty limit? And then we link below to what that is, so that actually fits well. Does that work?
That's fine. Thank you.
Yep. The language is fine with me as well. So what did I say here? I said that the I'm just going to do this in real time.
Sorry, it should, but then it shouldn't be reduced accordingly. It should be they're fined for speeding tickets issued via speed camera is excused, or something along those lines.
The establishment of additional speed zone cameras should be the subject of extensive and properly noticed public engagement and focused on areas with high rates of traffic accidents. Do we want to add a parens that this would be a perfect use of the proposed task force? Or do we want to just leave it as is? Christine, I see a nod there. Does that work for folks? I think it's always good if we can be like, and we've given you a body that can help with this, so please don't ignore them. What do you think? Or leave it as is? You'd strike extensive, okay? Of a properly noticed public engagement and focus on areas with high rates of traffic accidents. Jide? Was the hand from before?
Yeah, the hand was from before.
Sorry.
I guess, I mean, still in my mind, this doesn't necessarily prevent, like my goal is to prevent unnecessary stops by police if possible. So.
Can we add that to the goal? Balance the need for traffic safety, assuring that civil fines do not unfairly burden those of limited needs, and limit unnecessary traffic stops. Do we want to clarify it?
No, because I don't really think that's the point of what Ajmal laid out here.
Okay. Jumana?
So I think in terms of the question of trying to eliminate or, you know, sort of tamp down more traffic stops, I hear you, Gita. I think there's a couple of things, right? One is the question of like, just because you're not speeding, they can still stop you for a lot of other things. But more importantly, I think having this be a subject of conversation where it is noticed or it is tied to a reason of speeding or traffic, you know, really sort of critical traffic enforcement versus we just want to put a camera here because we think a lot of, you know,
yeah.
I'm not saying this Takoma Park Council is sort of, you know, sneaky in their ways, but it's not like people can't just put cameras in neighborhoods where it will focus the enforcement. And it is a form of enforcement, even if it's not a traffic stop, right? On particular communities. And when it comes to, I think Ajmal laid out really well why it's not that easy to get a poverty exemption. And so it's still putting a burden on people. And so I think having it noticed and having it discussed before it goes in is just a good check on that.
Yep. Dwayne?
So, I mean, I'm just weighing in here with just my thought on the overall goal, maybe related to this, which is preventing the disproportionate stops of Black and brown people within our community. We have a pass-through community. We have a pass-through community that borders many jurisdictions. But as best as we have in our power and the council's power, we would like to ensure that these goals work towards preventing the disproportionate and highly, well, I'll just leave it a disproportionate stop of Black and brown drivers and individuals in our community. So that, to me, that's an overarching goal. I mean, it's for that goal itself. I mean, I shouldn't say goal, overarching theme for that goal. So.
Do we want to add that? Jide, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's not just, to, I guess, Jumana's statement, it's not just the speed stops that I'm concerned with, because I know that in my neighborhood, I guess people have said people are doing rolling stops, right? And so they've set up, just like kind of, they'll sit off on a side street or whatever and wait for you not to come to a complete stop or whatever and issue you a warning there, right? So, my goal really is where it's not necessary or what have you. And if there's a way to have a machine do it and we know that, people with lesser means or what have you aren't going to have to pay the fine, then, great. And in terms of how onerous we make it in terms with the poverty exemption, I would honestly prefer we make it less onerous. If you have a legitimate, if you have a legitimate reason not to pay, then, you shouldn't have to jump through hoops. The purpose is to discourage people from, driving fast or in a reckless fashion. And the added benefit is people don't get pulled over or whatever. So there's less of a likelihood of a misunderstanding.
Mm-hmm. Thoughts? I think we figured out this piece, which is great. Do we want to add Dwayne's proposed language to the goal? Or do we think it's fine as is? I see Ajmal, there's another recommendation around limiting stops below. Maybe that fits more there. I'm also going to just remove the second heading of speed cameras because speed camera is included in the actual recommendations. So it's just a formatting thing. Any thoughts on this? Come back to it?
Sure.
Got it. Okay. At Kiminori, you added something here. Accordingly, we must also foster community police relationships which promote procedurally just policing and incentivize de-escalation. I remember that was an edit you had made before as well. So I think that's not new, but may have not stuck. But I would love to make sure I got that one correct. Jumana, I see your hand.
Just a question for Kiminori, because it sounds like a very specific thing, but I don't have a frame of reference of what procedurally just policing is. And I don't know if there's a frame of reference for it. If there is, I think we need to reference it. Otherwise, it's sort of like a made up standard. And I don't know how people are supposed to get meaning from it. I mean, it may be a standard of some sort. I've not heard it. And I'm just curious if there's a reference point for it. Like, it sounds good in theory, but is there a specific
I can
meaning
add
to it?
that, yeah.
Okay.
Awesome, Kiminori, and not looking for you to have to do this real time, but if you have the citation or a reference, just drop it in the chat. That way we can go back up and add it and make sure it fits. Okay, moving through here. This attachment 11, Adam, I believe you sent us this. I just wanted to confirm that. Is that correct? We're not waiting on it. We just have to add it. Was this yours? It was a letter from Professor Stoughton.
Yeah, I shared it with my subcommittee, though I don't know that it's been shared with the broader task force. But
if you have it, you could just re-forward it to me. I'll make sure we get it included. But do you want to just give folks an idea of what it was? Yeah,
I mean, the 20-second summary is that, some people say officers should never be able to view their body cam, and others say they should always be able to view it. And it's sort of a compromise position that, if the officers just need to go back and look at what the victim reported was stolen or something, they should generally have the tool available to write accurate reports. But when it comes to police officers using force, we want to capture their unbiased perception of what the threat was and what the reason was that they used force. So they have to give their justification for what they perceived, because that's what's most important, and then they can look at the body cam afterward.
Before reviewing. Okay, got it. And I'll adjust the formatting of that footnote as well. Jumana, I see your hand.
Yeah, so this is one of the ones that I tried to send you. And if you could scroll up just a little bit on the body cameras, there's a question of releasing. Can you scroll up a little bit, because I can't see it. Okay, so number C, that's great. Letter C, the question of the police department, and I'd raised this before, and I still think it's a problem that they can apply to and be granted an extension of time by the city council. I don't know that, at least to me, that's the most sound way of going about this. I don't know that our city council is necessarily, like, city councils can tend to defer to the police department and also may not be sort of the best experienced people to make the call as to whether or not something should be, whether or not a video needs to be held. Like, I think we're mismatching in terms of the request we're making and the expertise of the council.
Thoughts on that? Adam?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Joanna. I know there was at least one tweak that we had discussed before that maybe we could add, like grant that they can only seek an extension to preserve, the integrity of an ongoing criminal investigation. So that might narrow it somewhat. I don't imagine that.
I think so, but I think we had also talked about also having them have to, report something publicly as to why they're asking this, right? To not just be a conversation between the police department and the city council, and the city council makes a decision and no information flows out.
Right. Okay, so could we add something about the purposes of a criminal investigation, and that the, rationale should be provided publicly? I think that implies that they're, they don't have to release their whole investigative file and release sensitive details, but they do at least have to say that we're still interviewing witnesses or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's along the line of what we had talked about.
So what I did, I just dropped into the chat the actual text from here. If able, could you go in and play with that a little bit and see if we can get the updated language, and we'll just drop it back in. You two understand what you're asking for very clearly, and I just want to make sure it's captured that way, and then we'll share it with the group. Well,
and it may also, the other thought that I had, if this auditor role comes to fruition, or a subcommittee, that they may be well suited to be part of this conversation.
Yep. So I dropped that in. If you two could look at that, we'll come back to it. I'll make sure we get the updated stuff, but it sounds like there's agreement around that. Michael had recommended that city manager might play a role there as well. Adam, we do have the letter. Carol from our team confirmed that we do have it. So we will go ahead and just get that updated. Police auditor, Kiminori asked, should this be a public safety auditor? Because we've said that this may or may not extend beyond policing functions, or do we want to call this a police auditor? Strong feelings on that?
Yeah, I may have initially suggested as public safety auditor, but I don't have any sort of strong preference.
I was going to say, for the new department that's being stood up, it seems like there may be things that are also worthy of review. So maybe police auditor should be, maybe it should be amended.
Create a public safety auditor. Seems like everyone likes that. Adam, I know this was a very specific recommendation. Just want to make sure that's a friendly amendment and there's no questions about that. We all good? Okay, perfect. I got a message that we're all good. So that is great. Perfect. Okay. This is a note you added, correct, Kiminori? The auditor would make the process as transparent to and driven by the public as possible.
I think Jumana made this point multiple times, and I couldn't find it. So, and I like it, so I added it back. Make it more explicit.
Got it.
But correct me, Jumana, if it's not right.
So that was actually one of the points I had. I think there's a couple of things. Like, one of them is that we sort of took the conversation about weighing in on police policies and practices and put it under the auditor, when at least my intention initially was that there would be, that was more public engagement, that shouldn't be a behind closed doors conversation, but that should be a public conversation. Like, maybe it's led by or facilitated by the auditor, but my intention when we talked about this, when it comes to police policies and practices, that there be community engagement and transparency on that. and not that just be under the role of the auditor, because that makes it sound like the one person or the subcommittee is who's involved versus the larger community. And there's nothing as far as that I've ever seen, and granted, I haven't looked at every one of the police policies, but there's nothing that's like behind closed doors. Like all the policies are on the website, so a public conversation about them shouldn't run into any kind of friction.
Got it. Adam, I see your hand.
Sorry.
Not your hand. Okay, Kiminori.
Yeah, so I mean, I think if Jumana has, specific changes to each of these points that she maybe have already sent to you, then, remove my edit, I think, and then make more tangible changes.
I can send you something if you guys start accepting my emails again.
Because it is our last meeting, I want to make sure any changes that we make are happening here. So Jumana, I can pull that email up if that is helpful and see if we can just cut and paste some of it, or, and tell me if this works or not, instead of trying to add that language into each individual sub-bullet, should we just craft a bullet around the expectation is that this auditor operates in a public way whenever possible?
No, I think there's two separate things happening, right?
Yep.
One is that, yes, what you were saying, that the way the auditor operates should be in as public facing way as possible in terms of information flow and making clear sort of what's being addressed and what's happening. I think the second piece, and I'm trying to remember under what section it is, where it's under A, right? So auditor works closely with the Police Accountability Board, administrative change, blah, blah, blah. Internal investigations, receiving internally generated complaints, at the city level by reviewing internal investigations, receiving internal, whatever. And then it says identifying broad patterns of residential complaints and conducting evaluations of policies, police policies, training and practices. That's the part that I thought was intended for a public facing conversation, right? Under transparency, like the evaluations and conversations about police policies, training and practices should be a public facing event. I think the other thing the auditor is doing does need to be communicated out to the public, right? But isn't necessarily like open to an entire community engagement kind of role. So like to the extent, so like the auditor should be making any findings and conclusions public to the extent possible, but also, and maybe like I said, this could be an auditor facilitated function in terms of engaging the community in a public conversation about police policies, training and practices.
Yep. I'm going to add that language here. Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, Jumana just took the words right out of my mouth. That what I was going to suggest was, just tweaking that to say that the auditor could, be sort of a community liaison and lead public discussions about those things.
Would also be charged with coordinating community engagement around, is it too broad to say around these issues? Or should we say around police policies, training and practices?
I think it needs to be broken out where, like I said, that there should be somewhere in here, the statement that, the auditor should work to make, to the extent possible, all of their findings public or accessible to the public. And then this separate portion, right, on the question of police policies, training and practices, that maybe the auditor can lead, a process in which the community can engage in the conversation around what police policies, practices, etc. are. So like one is an overarching one because there's a whole list of things that the auditor would oversee, be involved in, etc. So they should be making, sorry, they should be making, as much of a public report out as is possible under the context of whatever they're operating in. And that's, me still not understanding as well as Adam, what the new version of LEBOR looks like and what they can and can't talk about publicly. But then the alternate, this piece would be a standalone, which you just made it. And I would take it out of the conducting evaluations. I mean, if that's in there, then I think it would need to say that if it's in there, that conducting evaluations to make suggestions on which policies need updating and should be, brought to the public or something. I don't know. But what I don't want is to end up in a place where we have an auditor and that's completely within their purview to look at the policies and practices, or that their findings are just sort of somewhere in the middle of bureaucracy and we don't ever see them or don't understand what they've been doing or what they're finding.
Yep. Did I get this right? So we've pulled, so we've still got evaluation here, and then we've said the auditor would make the process as transparent to and driven by the public as possible. This would include coordinating community engagement around police policies, training, and practices.
So I'm sorry if I'm making this difficult. I think there has to be two separate things that happen. One is a more general recommendation, because there's not just in A, but like a whole set of things that the auditor will be involved in, right? Receiving confidential complaints, investigation of complaints against police officers, like all these other things they're involved in. I think there's an overarching recommendation that, to the extent possible by law and by whatever, that they make the findings of their various investigations, assessments, et cetera, you know, accessible to the public.
Okay, I'm getting it.
Which is different than the specific piece that they would, you know, maybe be in the place of coordinating community input and engagement. And I would say community input, because engagement is like you told them, right?
Yep. Input. Additionally,
I don't think this should be part of the same section though. Like I said, I think these are two separate things, because there's so many things in this whole thing. It needs to be like an overarching one to me that talks about in relation to all of the things that the auditor is now sort of charged with. If there's going to be somebody who's got their fingers in all these things, that whatever conclusions they draw, whatever information that they gather, whatever recommendations they have, should be made public to the extent possible.
And it's not, help me with some language here, folks. I want to make sure I'm getting this right. It's not as simple as saying, and ensuring that the results of any evaluations or inquiries are made public in a timely manner. Is that?
I think it can be that. I just think when you put it next to the question of, you know, community input on police training and practices, it seems like that's the only place where their findings have to be public. And that's why I think they need to be separated. Because I think that the outcomes of all evaluations, that should be for all of the things. So maybe that's at the end, but for all the things they do and not just on that one particular engagement process.
Michael, would it, and this is just throwing this out there, would it be the B is the auditor would make the process as transparent to and driven by the public as possible, and then the sub bullet under that would be, this would include coordinating and what you wrote, and then another sub bullet would be what Jumana just outlined. Is that ideally?
Okay, this is, I'm sorry, but this is like my legislative brain at work. If the make public to the extent possible is a sub bullet of B, then it only seems to apply to B. And I think it has to apply to all of them. So like A and C, or A and D and E and whatever other things are involved in. If I know this sounds very nitpicky, it's my lawyer brain, but if you put it as a sub bullet of B, then it doesn't seem to apply to the rest.
It seems like it should just go first, and it should be a reporting requirement for each of the other elements. Is that what you want?
Yes.
So I'm taking all of B, I'm cutting and pasting it into the new A, and now help me with any other edits I need to make to it. Should, instead of the process, can we say like their work, the auditor would make their work as transparent to and driven by the public as possible. This would include coordinating community input around police policies, training, and practices, and ensuring that the outcomes of all evaluations are made available in a timely manner.
I think it's their work and their findings. I think it's both.
Great. That's great. Their work and findings and practices. We'll clean up the grammar here, and ensuring that the outcomes of all evaluations are made public in a timely and transparent manner. Is that close?
Yes, I think so.
Awesome.
The only thing I want to add to
Thanks,
what
Christina.
I heard Jumana saying is, like, in other places we've stuck in examples. So like I see that there's like things around I just don't know if you want to name, if you want to be any more specific, since this seems really, I just don't know if you want to be more specific around like, is stuff going on the website? Are there forums? I read later that we named some of that stuff, but I don't know if it needs to be more specific here.
Okay. Thoughts on that? And Christina, if any suggestions on additional verbiage I can add, happy to include it here. While we're looking at that, go ahead, please.
No, I don't want to, of course, frame any of the recommendations. But I think some of the sub bullets may touch on that point Christina made.
Mm-hmm. And the overall communications recommendations have a lot about that. So maybe we can just refer it back there. Think on that one for a second. As we are, I'm going to scroll back up here. I've got some updated language from Adam on the city council piece. Okay, I'm just going to drop it in here so we can see it. It's not a sub bullet, but I'm just going to drop it in here. What do we think about this? Within 10 days following any in-custody death, use of deadly force, or use of less lethal force by Takoma Park police officer, the department must release all body cam footage of the incident unless the police department applies for and is granted an extension of the time by the city council. Extension shall be authorized only to protect the integrity of ongoing criminal or internal investigations, and the rationale shall be made public. Does that work? Shumana, does that edit work for you?
Sorry, I'm looking at it.
Sorry. I can also drop it into the chat box if that's helpful. Yeah, or maybe I can't. There we go. Okay.
I mean, I think that works. I just, if we want to just stick the auditor in there, I think it might be also a worthwhile function, but, or whether it's the auditor or the subcommittee, but somebody who's got, because we put the subcommittee or the auditors as people with expertise in this area, I think having that person or that body be part of the review would be useful. But I think the language is good.
Informed by a new auditing function recommended below?
Sure.
Jide?
Yeah, I would be more concerned about it being the solely the auditor, or is the language now going to be the city council and the auditor?
Yeah, so it says unless the police department applies for and is granted an extension of time by the city council, informed by the new public safety auditor recommended below. So it's a city council decision, but I think what we're hearing is we're going to have this auditing function or subcommittee. They should be given the opportunity to weigh in on these things to inform the council's work.
Okay, that's fine. I just want as many eyes on it as possible.
With input from the. Okay, it's a good edit. Okay, let's go back down here. We're on page 10 of 15. We're making some good progress, but we got a couple things we really got to figure out below. So any additional specificity needed under the auditing function? Okay. Christina, one thing we could do is add a note here about, making sure that the recommendations and the communications functions are used to inform that additional amount of outreach. Might be a nice way to kind of cross-reference back to the other parts of the report. Go ahead, Jumana.
So just sort of in looking at this again and thinking about what Jide was suggesting is I think the conversation about, because it's either the auditor or the subcommittee, but the line about the auditor or subcommittee make their work and findings as transparent to and driven by the public as possible, yeah. I think should be part of that number 28. And then A as one of the functions coordinating input on policy, community input on policies, practices, etc. Does that make sense? So the first part of what you have is A, I think attaches to the section that's create a public auditor consisting of an individual or a subcommittee of the Public Safety Task Force.
Yeah.
The relevant professional expertise that would make their work and findings as transparent to and driven by the public as possible, period. And then start A, coordinating as one of the functions.
That would, I like that a lot. That would make the
Yeah,
work.
that's totally G-Day's idea, and I totally agree. Just don't want credit for it.
No, I love this. This was 10 hours of my life last night. We've got 3 different things. What are we, how are we putting these into a format that says what we want them to? So this is great. Everyone fine with how this one works? Awesome. I think that really strengthens this. That's great. Let's move down here. This was around how specific do we want to be about the Dixon incident and what should be included here. Adam, I believe the line edits here came from you, correct? And then there's a footnote here that now says the task force understands that TPPD is currently undertaking internal review of the May 2020 incident and plans to have an outside police agency review its findings. None of the conclusions from those reviews were available to the task force at the time it submitted its final report. Once those findings are released, the permanent public safety task force should consider whether any modifications to this recommendation are appropriate. So I don't think that's, there was no real back and forth around that. It was just, are we all comfortable with including it at this level of detail? Everyone okay with how Adam updated that one? Go ahead, G-Day.
Sorry, is there a vehicle for the council to initiate requests to the auditor?
Interesting question, Adam. Do you know how that would work?
I don't think I wrote one in, but I would not object to that.
I'm just taking a quick scroll here to see if there's a natural place to append that to one of these, or if it would be a new sub-bullet, which might be.
I mean, I don't know if there are any concerns about that messing with the impartiality of the auditor's job.
It would be more right that the council could request a review of something. Yeah. Is that what you're saying? Like, how would you trigger the start of a review? So this talks about how they can receive confidential complaints from officers, etc. It's probably not as simple as adding it there. Adam, you've done so much on how to structure this. I don't want to mess with this in a way that undoes. Is this a separate bullet point, you think, about kind of reviews by the auditor can be triggered in a variety of ways, including?
I mean, it could just be a slight addition to H that would say, review any incidents of community concern, including at the request of city council. That's not prominent enough. We can look for another place for it.
I almost want to, if you're okay with this, let's leave that as H. And then here, I is the specific Dixon incident example. Does that work? So if we're at the council hearing and they're asking about it, like H and I stand alone. We've got an auditor function that could review specific incidences that would include those requested by the city council. An example of that is the Dixon incident. We're asking for that review because as a task force, we have not seen those findings and they could impact this recommendation going forward. Does that work for everybody?
It should be a sub bullet.
This one?
Yeah.
Yep. I'll figure out a formatting way to do that after all of this. Okay. Okay. Here we get to the last kind of three big issues where there were differing opinions, and these differing opinions were in the notes, and often it was comment bubbles where folks were trying to find the right language about the different opinions. So what you see here is that updated text. It was a text-based version of what it seemed like the discussion was. But number one, let me know if these are captured correctly. Number two, do we want to take actual votes and figure out if one is minority and one is majority? Or do we want to lay out that we are unified, that this is an issue that needs exploration? Here are the two considerations that the task force have. Both are fine, and both I've seen in many task forces. So I just want some idea around that. Also understanding that we don't have every task force member on tonight. A numerical vote I would probably steer us away from, because there's just no way to fully capture that, but we could certainly indicate a majority and minority from a sense of the group. So this first one is all about license plate reader technology. I believe these were directly drafted in the comment bubbles, and I just moved them over here. So one eliminates all funding for current use of and purchase of additional license plate reader technology. It notes that civil rights groups have raised serious questions about privacy, gives a little history about Takoma Park and ACLU, and given the potential to prevent privacy intrusions, it remains unclear whether this technology is really needed to prevent crime in Takoma Park and should be eliminated. Other side of it says, recommends the city council request information from police on how license plate readers have been employed and the investigative value that they provide, and then weigh any benefits against the privacy concerns articulated in the other recommendation. If it is determined that LRP should continue to be used, clear rules on its usage should be established, along with reporting requirements to ensure it's used in an even-handed way. I'm just going to pause here and open up some discussion. Give me a sense of where the group is on this.
Michael?
Please, Jide.
Yeah, I'm not a particularly big fan of 31. I prefer 32 or what have you, and I would say we can just use the national ACLU's recommendations on how to regulate the use of the license plate readers, or suggest that as a possible starting point.
Thank you, Jide. Other thoughts? Adam?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote the dissent here, so I don't want to speak for long, but I just to explain my concern, we don't really get any documents in the resource folder or hear from any subject matter experts on LPRs. So it just seemed like I felt like I didn't have enough information to know, about the costs and benefits and trade-offs here to really get on board with just scrapping it. But I recognize the safety concerns, so I wanted to give a nod to that, and it just say, the permanent task force should delve into this, or as Mayor Stewart said, we should revisit this.
Thank you, Adam. Jumana?
I think on there is a typo. It is an LPR or an ALPR in some cases, right? Automated license plate readers. When it comes to the question of not funding them, I think the other thing we didn't get is any kind of indication as why they're needed or necessary for the Takoma Park Police Department. And, I find it to be just sort of one of a number of types of invasive technologies that can track you everywhere. We've seen, and I don't, the truth is, I don't think we've heard from the police department. I don't think I pushed it in terms of how do they work, but it's not even like getting rid of them. I mean, I think there's a larger question of how the police department uses technology and what kind of oversight and parameters are put on it. Because at the end of the day, we can get rid of theirs and they can go to private companies that have license plate readers and mine all of their data. And so there's, to me, a real question on this one, but I think it is worth putting forth dissenting views and letting the council dig in and have some public conversation about it, because we don't really have a mechanism by which the public is able to engage, have transparency, understand what technology the police department's using, why are they using it, what are the benefits, what are the drawbacks, and I think that needs to be part of this conversation. So I don't know how we do it, because I feel like we've sort of lost a number of our members that haven't been around for these past couple of meetings, and so I don't know how we make this recommendation on either of these as a task force. And that was actually a general question I had, right? Is if this goes out in the name of the task force, there's people who haven't been present for whatever reason. It's not a judgment thing, right? But they just haven't been here for these conversations where we're whittling this down, and how do we represent this as a task force product without all of that input? But that's sort of a side issue too. I still think we should have, I don't know how you do it, but a majority or minority or just dissenting views or two options.
Got it. And on that last part, all the drafts have been shared. I understand it's been a hectic week, and we have gotten responses from folks who couldn't make it for a variety of reasons, travel, etc., that have said, these look good. I have updates. Folks who have provided updates. I believe we've gotten all of the dissenting views and edits, but completely fair point. On this one, we can simply take out, and we can address each of these as they come up. We can take out the words majority and minority if we think the numerical piece of this isn't necessarily helpful. What is helpful is saying, we agree this is an important issue. It deserves additional study. The types of proposed solutions included, and then we show the range of debate to inform future work. We can even add something that says, this is a perfect topic for the continuing public safety task force to take up in their work. Jide and Ajmal.
I was going to say, Jemana made a decent point about just technology in general. I think one of the things that I still don't think we've necessarily tackled particularly well is having something in about a need to report on new technologies or current technologies being used. I know that for the body-worn cameras or what have you, there was great language there, but obviously there are a number of other technologies that are used that probably would benefit from additional scrutiny. So it may be worth considering even some general language about a requirement to report on what technologies are being used and what the policies are that govern their use or what have you, and maybe setting up some sort of like 2-year or 3-year review.
Not trying to oversimplify this, but does it weaken this if we try and do it here? Evaluate the proper use of policing technologies, including license plate reader technologies. We then go into that, and then we add a bullet that says technologies are evolving quickly. It would be an important oversight function of the task force and others to be evaluating these on an ongoing and regular basis. Does that get close to what you were recommending, Jide?
That works for me.
Go ahead, Ajmal.
So in 32, the last bit, clear rules on its usage should be established, along with, and then I put language in the chat that I think is more meaningful, in my opinion, than reporting requirements. So I have clear rules on its usage should be established, including but not limited to the cause required to use the data and limitations on sharing such data with other departments.
So if it is determined that LPR should continue to be used,
clear rules on its usage should be established, including but not limited to requirements regarding the cause required to use the data and limitations on sharing such data with other departments. I mean, it just gives a little bit more meat to what we mean.
As to the cause for such use and limitations on sharing the data?
It's in the chat. It's the cause required to use the data. So I mean, the ACLU has recommended that there be a reasonable cause requirement. And then they've also recommended that agencies adopt limitations not allowing the sharing of such data with other agencies that don't have similar cause requirements.
Okay. Dwayne, please.
This is kind of maybe piggybacking a little bit on what Jemana was saying, and maybe Jide as well. Is there any way, and folks who are thinking about this a little bit more, have more knowledge about this area, help me out with my thought on this one. But I know we are this particular recommendation is mostly focused on license plate readers, but I'm also, something that Jide mentioned and something that just popped in my head was just about emerging technologies. I mean, there's not any real way that we could get ahead of them because there's already things going on that with respect to technology that, you know, perhaps police are using that we just are not aware of. But I think the last bit of language that Ajmel was suggesting, just in regards to technology generally, that the police offer some level of explanation as to the use, continuing use of it, or how it's used and the purpose. And, you know, just that's, I mean, I'm just kind of brainstorming my thoughts here, but it just seems like, again, there's license plate readers are just one type of technology that may be used that could be subject to abuse, and there could be more out there that, again, I don't know, I'm not aware of any, and folks who are in this area could probably educate me on the use and of those types of technologies. But it seems to me that there may be a need for some language that would address the broad use of these types of technologies and within Takoma Park. So that's just my thought on what I was as I was listening in on what folks are saying.
Dwayne,
folks weigh in and let me know your thoughts and whether I'm kind of just randomly babbling or just or I hit on something that seems important.
Thank you, Dwayne. I'm trying to make some edits here just as I'm hearing folks. Jumana.
So yes, I didn't focus enough on it, but I tried to include something on that sort of fallen out in the transparency section. I agree with what both Jada and Dwayne were saying. I think there are models out there of what that looks like, but I think just the first note is that this isn't, again, this should just be an auditor function. This needs to be a public engagement function. Like, people need to know what technologies are being proposed, why the police department thinks they need them, what are the policies, and all of these things needs to be a public debate and completely transparent, right? There should be nothing secret about it. If it has to be secret, they shouldn't have it. And so I think that's a really clear parameter. The ACLU does have sort of model legislation on this. A number of cities and towns have passed legislation on this. Oakland in particular is like pretty far ahead of a lot of places, but there's a number of cities that have passed similar type of legislation that either ensures that there's transparency at the level of before they can even obtain anything, input on policies and all of that. Oakland, I think, went as far as banning certain types of technologies, predictive policing technologies, and other sort of algorithmic decision-making things. I get that now I'm talking jargony, but there is, this is what I do all day, but there is a lot of good models out there. And I think, you know, bookmarking it here as something that we think that council should take up, I think would be really important.
So look at what I just did on the screen here. I think this gets to what we're talking about here. We've broadened the goal a bit to evaluate, and it might not even have to be reevaluate. Maybe it's evaluate the proper use of policing technology, including license plate reader technologies, given privacy concerns. We then have a standalone recommendation that says that the task force is unified in their agreement that emergent and rapidly changing policing technologies are an important issue, deserving additional study and input. This should be a focus of the proposed ongoing task force and involve public engagement and transparency. Then we say, specific to LPRs, there were the following views on the proposed solutions, and we just lay out what they are. Does that get closer? I actually think that strengthened this in a really unique way, because it won't allow the council to be like, oh, we've already figured out license plate readers. It's saying, oh, there's a recommendation here around police technology, and they've given us specific parameters around license plate reader. I think this is more actionable, but go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, I just reevaluate the proper use, if any, of policing technology by itself can't be what we mean. So I think what we need is evaluate, you know,
yep,
any new policing technology, and potentially also reevaluate the use of LPRs.
Including a evaluation of license plate reader technologies. Okay. We good here? Go ahead, Jide.
Sorry, do we have to be specific about license plate reader technologies in that top part? Because there may be other current technologies that are currently employed that also warrant scrutiny.
I think the title was just trying to introduce what comes below, but what we could do is pull out the goal and include that just before the LPR one, if we want to do that.
Okay.
Jumana?
I also think we ended up at license plate readers because it's the only one that was disclosed in a firm that is being used by the police department. They were, I'm not saying that nothing else is being used, but at least in terms of the questions that were asked, that's the only one that that at least I'm aware of and that they have confirmed in this context. So I think that's why it came up. I agree with what you're saying in terms of you can specify the LPRs later, not necessarily in the headline, but that's how the ALPRs got to be a focus.
Is it good as written? Does this do this, or do you want a separate title? I don't think it changes much, so I'm happy to move it if we'd like us to. Does it read better that way?
I think you could say evaluate the proper use, if any, of new policing technologies or whatever that they're seeking, including a reevaluation of any existing technologies currently in use. So you're both forward-looking and current, and then you don't have to say LPRs because they're already in use. Does that work?
Already in use. Can I say such as? Just so folks know, there's actually, I can just move. I just need to give some introduction to why we now have 2 paragraphs on license plate readers if we haven't said that somewhere, but I can do it. I can do it down here. Specific, I can just stay here. Specific to license plate readers, there were specific to the existing use of license plate readers. How's this? Including a renovation, given privacy concerns. Then we have a standalone recommendation. Then we say specific to license plate readers. There was the following views. The task force also shared the following views on license plate readers. I'll do it that way. Does that work?
Which are currently in use by the Takoma Park Police Department.
Also shared the following views on license plate readers, which are currently in use by Takoma Park PD. Okay. Okay, perfect. Much clearer. Canine. We didn't have a full goal here. So this was added in, I believe Adam added this text, limit or eliminate the use of police canines to prevent unreasonable uses of force and investigative tactics. Let me know if that captures the goal here. And then this one there was actually not extensive text on this, but there were 2 very clear positions. One of them says, well, it says unified in the agreement, this is an important issue. One says recommend eliminating all funding for the use of canines after the requirement of the single canine. The other one says supports future canine use for tracking and detection purposes, but not for use against individuals. What do we want to do on this one, Jumana?
On this point, the support for future canine use one, I guess is 35.
Yep.
That was one of the things I had sent you. It says for tracking and detection purposes, but not for use against individuals. I think it needs to be more specific of that, but not for use, against individuals or drug detection. Right, because a dog sniff dog can be under tracking and detection purposes, and I don't, at least from what I thought we were talking about was like, I still don't agree. I'm still on number 34 as my preference, but at least I thought what we were discussing was like, you're trying to figure out where somebody's bag ended up and they sort of sniff and find it in the bushes, not that, they've stopped a car, they've stopped some people, and then the dog comes and smells their bag and indicates there's something in it. Like I think we need to be very specific about that, or if that is intended to be part of it, then I have a much bigger problem with 35A than I used to.
Got it. Adam?
Clearly, I've chosen this as the hill that I'm going to die on. I think that there is room for the detection function. I take Jimana's point about the bomb scares not being a really big deal in Takoma Park, but those explosive ordnance disposal dogs also detect gunpowder, so they find guns. So you can find guns that are being moved, through the town in vehicles. If somebody commits a shooting and they discard the gun, the dog can find that. And either one of those two types of dogs, either a drug dog or an EOD dog, can also do tracking or article searches, meaning finding stuff that somebody threw or finding the path that someone took. So if I'm the only one that wants to, potentially leave room for drug detection as well, we can say that. I think that there might be uses for that too, and I don't think that Takoma Park Police have really abused that. We talked to the chief about it, and he said that there were like 1,700 car stops in 2020, and I think they called the drug dog out like 3 times, and he found drugs each time. So, if there's an opportunity for them to say have actionable intelligence that somebody's trafficking drugs or something, I don't really have a problem with the dog going and doing a sniff for that as well. But if everybody wants to limit it to just tracking or detection of guns or other things but not drugs, then I will step back and let that be the alternate position.
Thank you, Adam. Ajmal, and then Jumana.
Suggested amendment along the lines of some of my earlier discussions with Senator Braskich earlier in this process. I think at one point we had talked about perhaps a reasonable cause requirement before a sniff is done, which would be more than the Constitution requires. I mean, as I said in my comments, I think this is your hill, so I totally understand if you don't want to take my amendment. But I think that if you did add that, I think it would still, I think I would still feel good about 35, in that we're still making some progress in terms of advancing the law in a direction that I personally believe is more just.
Yeah, I mean, if you can find that language, Michael, if you delete or drug detection, but then after tracking and detection, and drop a footnote where it says detection, and then you can put in whatever that language is that Ajmal and I thought was getting at, the primary concern, which is the idea is that the police are not going to ever call a dog out for a drug sniff absent reasonable suspicion, because right now they could just call a dog whenever they feel like it, as long as they're holding somebody for something else. And that would start to address concern. But really my primary motive here is to just keep the dogs for tracking, because I think that the information that was provided to us, the significant deployments, shows that these dogs sometimes can crack really significant violent crime cases, and I know that they can buy dogs that do sniffing but aren't apprehension dogs. So I just don't see why we wouldn't allow them that tool, especially given that it's not a terribly expensive one.
Got it. Jumana, team, can someone go back to a past version and see if we can find that? It was a document where Ajmal and Adam had offered feedback in comment bubbles. It was a document just a couple of versions ago. Let's just see if we can find that language so we have it.
You can just add the language at the end of 35. So it could be a majority or minority of the task force supports future canine use for tracking and detection purposes, but not for the use against individuals. And I'm just making this up on the fly. And in the context of vehicle sniffs, only when reasonable cause exists.
Yep. Jumana, and then I'll come to you, Adam. Jumana.
So I'm also super willing to die on this hill. Just Adam and I are dying on different hills. First I agree with Michael. I am fully on board with 34. But more importantly, I think as we're reimagining public safety, I think the drug sniffing dog is problematic because we should be moving to a model where people are treating addiction or legalizing drugs and not finding more ways to use drugs to funnel people into the criminal legal system. That is a fundamental, I think, component of reimagining public safety, is reimagining how we deal with drugs and things that have been historically made illegal in order to target Black and brown communities, quite literally through the history, like by history. And so I am very uncomfortable. I'm like a vociferous dissent to, like, I don't think we should have dogs, but I'm a vociferous dissenter on having drug sniffing dogs of any sort. And the idea that this particular chief is doing it in this particular way does not move me, because Takoma Park is changing. The number of $1 million houses is going up. It is going to change. This chief won't be here forever. This council won't be here forever. I think it is worth looking at in that context, and not just how this particular chief or this particular department has used or could use the dog.
So I'm going to go to Jide. This may be one where we lay out that there are very strong and differing opinions. Based on the chat, it seems like there's an opinion that we need to eliminate dogs and get rid of the qualifier about after the current retirement. There's another position that says the current dog can retire and then we get rid of them. There's another one that says use them in this context. And there's another one that says use them in this context, but that can never include drug sniffing. We may not be able to, nor need to merge those into a watered down recommendation. It doesn't necessarily give the council a lot of guidance, but it does define the terms of debate. So guide me to where you want us to go on this one, but Jide, go for it.
So all I would say is to me, it sounds like the language that Ajamel and Adam worked out. I'm fine with it for 35. And I would also point to the focus group with the immigrants of African descent and some of the immigrants of Central American descent or what have you, where they also cited two concerns about drugs and crime. So, I mean, I don't necessarily know that it's just Black and brown communities that are only concerned about not being stopped for drugs or what have you. I think that they may also have concerns about those sorts of things in their communities or what have you. So I don't think that we should kind of speak all in one direction. I do have concerns about these sorts of procedures being used for low-level offenses. But if it's, if there's a suspicion that it might crack some sort of large drug ring or what have you, I'm not necessarily opposed to preventing people from trafficking drugs, which to me is a different thing than trying to criminalize individual drug use.
So let me do this. I think we're all rather clear on kind of where the terms of debate are. I'm not holding anyone to a numerical value, but I'd love to just get a sense of where the group is on this. With your permission, and if you're not comfortable, please tell me that. I'd love to get a sense of kind of how many folks are affiliated with number 34 and how many folks are affiliated with number 35, just to get a sense of where we are, and then we'll come back to debate and see if that was helpful or not. Are we comfortable with that? Anyone not comfortable with that approach at this point? Okay, I'm going to start with 34. So we can do it that way as well. If you can just put your hands up, how many folks affiliate more with number 34? Help me, team here. 1, 2, 3. So I have Christina, Jumana, Michael. Okay. Did I miss anyone?
I'm also on team 34.
That was Ajmal. Okay.
And you missed me as well. This is Dwayne. I'm on 34 as well.
Perfect. And miss anyone else on 34? Sadie, I see you as well. Perfect. And then 35. 35, we've got Jide, Adam. Okay. I am not in any way trying to extrapolate that to folks who are on the call, but that is a rather clear majority minority position. So could we make this then is written as such? A majority of the task force recommends this, a minority of the task force recommends this. And then we add in, this should be the subject of, it already says that. It's an important decision for future work. Are we comfortable with that? Adam, go ahead. or were you
That
voting?
was still my voting hand. But yeah, I always envisioned this being a majority minority
Yep.
section, which is why I drafted it that way. So I'm totally comfortable with that.
That is perfect. Okay. I'm not moving on from this yet, so don't worry if you haven't had a chance to get your thought in. That is clear, and I think we've settled that piece. There was a couple comments in the chat box about adjusting some of the language in 34 or 35. Given how it's written now, majority minority, does this work, or is anyone looking for additional edits?
I'd like some of the non-pursuit stuff in for 35.
Yep, give me some specifics around that.
I think, Adam, you alluded to different types of dogs that can be secured, right?
Right. So by not for use against individuals, I meant not apprehension. So you can add a line that says the minority encourages the city to purchase only dogs that are trained in tracking and apprehension, tracking and detection, but not apprehension.
But not for use. But not for use for apprehension or against individuals. Can we add it there?
I mean, I think what's there kind of implies what I just said. So if you would just need to add a parenthetical after not for use against individuals, that is, biting and holding or something like that.
So can I do like i.e. biting and holding?
Yeah.
Gosh, I can't even spell anymore. Biting and holding. Okay. Does that friendly amendment change anyone's votes, or are we still good? Michael Rubin has suggested and the retirement, not after the retirement. Is that a friendly amendment, or would we like to debate that one? Agree with Michael. We good? Perfect. Okay. Okay, this is the last one where there was a couple different points. This one was, we went back and pulled audio from the recording to try and piece together the positions on this, just to make sure, because we know it's highly nuanced. So please let us know if we want to do majority minority on this one, or if anything else needs to be changed. So this goal, we added in, I believe by request, the actual amount, so folks knew what we were talking about. And then we said the majority minority of the task force recommends eliminating funding for the construction of a new dispatch area and additional spaces for TPPD. Remember, before this was just about dispatch, but then you all shared information that it was broader than that. As significant portions of the dispatch responsibility, et cetera. You can read what's on the screen. And then the second part said a majority minority recommends proceeding with the budget improvements given subpar conditions of the current workspace, which led to concerns regarding privacy. However, it is recommended that ARPA funds be used where possible, that these renovations be done in a way that allow for non-police office meeting space use in the future, and that continued efforts be made to shift funding from enforcement to assistance. Let me know what you think. Ajmal.
Okay. I am going to take a somewhat stronger stance on this one than I have on other ones, but at the end of the day, I don't need the task force or want the task force even necessarily to call for the elimination of all funding for the construction that's happening. I think what would be most prudent, and I think this is the reasonable position, is that, again, we're talking about shifting a number of functions of the police department outside of the police department. It just doesn't make sense to me that we're going to go forward with this large scale expansion, and that's going to proceed exactly the way it would have proceeded before, while we're significantly reducing the police department. I understand that the police chief has waited a long time for this to happen, and that this has been in the works for a long time. But the reality is we're in a different world than we were when this started in 2016. And if that means that the police department has to wait a little bit longer and get a little bit smaller renovation, then I think that is appropriate given the amount of space that would be added under this construction. And so I think that, I'm willing to put forward as a compromise in the spirit of garnering additional votes, changing my language from recommending eliminating funding for the construction of new dispatch area to recommending reevaluating the plans for construction of a new dispatch area and additional spaces for the Takoma Park Police Department. And then I'm just reading the rest of the recommendation to see if anything else needs to be changed.
Yep.
You could take out eliminating.
Yep. I can't get my cursor to work, but yes, got it.
And then instead of alternatively, you could change it to including redirecting the funding for a secure private dispatch area. And then I think, you all know how I feel about leaving things a little bit too bland or amorphous. So I think there needs to be additional language, an additional sentence at the end of 36 that is along the lines of, this should include, at a minimum, strong consideration, or no, I mean, I'm going to go even stronger than that. This should include a new plan envisioning a smaller project in light of the reduced responsibilities of the police department.
Okay.
I understand that several of you probably still don't agree with 36.
I'm just noting it in real time so that we've got it.
That's where I'm at.
Got it. I'm going to go with Dwayne next. Thank you.
So Ajmal, you really had me up until that last sentence. I only say that because I raised my hand initially to lend my voice in support of 36, because I really do feel like there is a need to move that dispatch out of the police department. It doesn't need to be there. There are plenty of jurisdictions that have a separate dispatch that's not housed in the police department. Dispatch also, if I'm understanding it correctly, also deals with not only just police, but also EMS, fire department. So those things can actually be in another area. But the only reason I said you had me up until the last sentence is because of, I'm not sure where you were going with that last sentence, Ashby.
Yeah, so this is what I'm worried about, Dwayne, and talk, you helped me get through like the best result. I'm worried that they're going to get up there and they're going to be like, all right, we thought about it again. We're going forward with the initial plan. There, we met the requirement. I think that, I think I did it wrong. I think I meant to actually sort of give some real recommendation as to what the reevaluation should be, but I think I made it worse. Would it be better if I said this should include So you would just take out the last sentence? You think it would be better just taking out the last sentence?
I'm not sure, because my question more so, Ajmal, was like, what were you trying to say? I mean, because I hadn't even decided whether they should be gone or not. I was just not sure what you were trying to say. And correct me if I'm wrong, you're just trying to say that moving forward, the reevaluation should include a smaller project because of the shifting, because the functions of the police department are shifting. So the dispatch should be a smaller project. Is that what you're getting to?
So I mean, it's not just the dispatch. It's like the project as a whole is like several offices, a kitchen,
Oh,
like a
okay,
locker room
okay.
area, or maybe it's not a locker room area, but several offices, a new conference room or an interview room, and then a dispatch area. So there's this project
Okay.
is, there's a number of rooms that are part of it, not just the dispatch area.
Gotcha.
So I'm trying to be sensitive to
and this may be one where we need two recommendations, right?
Yeah.
And that's not bad. Like we're saying, we're reimagining public safety. We're shifting functions away from police. That should show up in the physical manifestation of building space at some point going forward. Whether
then I think that what I really should say is, I should say for the last sentence, if anything, the task force recommends a smaller project. In light of the proposed shifting of functions away from the police department.
This should include a new plan envisioning a smaller project.
I mean, I think we should change it to, if anything, the task force or a majority or a minority of the task force recommends a smaller project.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think I understand, man. I think my confusion was about what the word project meant. And so now, I mean, so now you gave me the context. I understand, and I'm back on board.
Adam.
Yeah, I don't mean to be the great dissenter this evening, but I just will say, for my part, you know, it's not much of an expansion of space that the police department is getting. It's really, they're just like moving things around and trying to make better use of the space that they have, and they're eating like a little bit of the lobby and absorbing that into the police department. So it's really just about kind of getting a makeover. And my sense in Target was that it was a pretty sad space and needed it. I mean, they had a small conference room that had been converted to like 3 cubicles, and you know, there isn't a kitchen for any you know, employees to even like heat up their food in a microwave. So I thought that, you know, the additions and upgrades are pretty modest, and you know, as a one-time expenditure that is, you know, lower than the cost of many houses in Takoma Park, I think it's reasonable for the upkeep of a large institution like this. I'd be willing, you know, like if there's a majority position or a minority position along those lines, that, you know, that I agree that the council should at least explore whether some of that office space could be carved out for you know, the crossing guards and the parking enforcement and all that, and try to make them, you know, more separate than they otherwise would be from the police department. I just think that the you know, the new project seems like it's a pretty reasonable one, and I think, you know, we could have a proposal that, you know, they just explore how to carve out some of that office space for the new functions and separate it from the police department.
I'm going to pause us here. Just given the hour and our dwindling numbers, we're going to be reaching a point soon where taking votes in majority minority isn't going to be effective or a fair representation. The 37 was a direct compilation of the thoughts of the folks who said, we're not fully comfortable getting rid of the funding, but we want it to be done in a way that it's flexible in the future. The ARPA fund was a direct recommendation in the notes, and that we need to be clear that going forward, the goal is to move from enforcement to assistance. Do we want to stop here and see if we can take a vote with the folks we have left just to see where we are? Or is this here? These aren't terribly different recommendations. It's saying you should reevaluate the plans because we're moving things away from policing in this report. If you do go forward, try and fund them this way, build them as flexibly as possible, and make sure that going forward, we're adopting a posture of. Those aren't as diametrically opposed as like the canine recommendation, which is do this or don't do this. Do we want to try and just state two positions, or do we want to take a vote on majority minority? Give me a sense here. And if we do majority minority, what we may want to do, or what I may want to do, is also send this around with a cover note to the full task force, just saying, give me your vote on this one, because we didn't have kind of a critical mass when we got to that point. I'm getting a sense just from reactions here that might be preferable, but let me know what you think. Where are we on this one?
I mean, I actually think we should vote on all of the big three that were LPRs, K9s, as well as this one. I think that's where we're all sort of split. I mean, I'd recommend just sending all three of them to all the task force members and asking them to vote on all three of them. And then I would actually include the actual votes in the report.
Got it. I'm very comfortable with asking for that, and we can do that over email. The city needs it tomorrow, but there's plenty of time to get a vote on that, and we can make sure folks know it's not like the whole report is being redebated. It's on these three things with the text here. Cast your vote. I can go either way on this, but in other task force, the actual inclusion of the numbers in some councils has been used as a way to easily dismiss the non-majority vote, and in others it's been, oh, this is really helpful, I have some context. So I can get the numbers, I can send them around, and then you all can let me know if you want the actual numbers included. But it has been used in the past to kind of take the minority view and be like, that doesn't matter because more people thought this, and in other cases it's not done that. So we're fine either way. I'm also a little worried that if we don't get 15 responses, it's 15-member task force and the vote was 5-2, that opens up more questions than I think it closes. But let's keep rolling through these. I think we've got the two positions defined here. We'll send them out through email and then update for majority minority. That is super helpful. Last one here wasn't a difference of agreement. It was, there were 3 comment bubbles on both of these that said, why are we reallocating? Is that important, or is the actual recommendation more important? I didn't want to touch this without talking to folks about it. So it seems like the recommendation here is both for scholarships and for job training programs. The question was, are we stating that reallocating is important and leaving this in, or are we not? Just give me some guidance on that. This is how it is in the current draft. So just let me know if you think we're changing anything. Kiminori?
The word.
Kiminori?
Oh yeah. Yeah, reallocate is fine, but if that doesn't happen, like I think we should still invest. So I just want to make sure that kind of happens. Like it's like, oh, we couldn't get enough, reallocation, like saving or something like that, so we won't be able to do this. Then it's I think that's not what we intend.
Kiminori, you're reminding me now. Yeah, you're reminding me of where some of this came from. It was I believe it was a back and forth that someone had either with Councilmember Searcy or Mayor Kate, where I think the specific question was, if we can use some ARPA funds for some of this stuff, is that okay? Or do they only have to come from reallocation? So what if we say invest in, and then the parentheses is, the goal is to reallocate funding from police department budgets to support this on an ongoing basis? Does that accomplish the goal, Michael?
I mean, I would just say keep the reallocate, from the budget, and then say, or find additional funding to support this, or do whatever. But I would not step away from reallocate, because we hardly ever talk about it, but it needs to happen. So
you're suggesting leave it. And
then say, or at minimum find additional funding to, to fund an increased number of scholarships, whatever. So.
Got it. G-Day?
All for the programs, not for the language of reallocating. I don't see it as being particularly productive if we don't know whether or not the money we're trying to pull away or what have you is actually going to do more harm. I thought that the larger point of all of this or what have you was to make community safety, or to make our neighborhoods safer. I don't necessarily know how that's always accomplished by just pulling money from one place if we can actually prop up in another way.
Thank you, G-Day. Other thoughts? Bear with me while I type something, but please give me some other thoughts. This is the last piece too, so we are at the end of this. Just give me 1 second. Invest in increased number of scholarships for after school and weekend programs for children in Copeland Park. And then we say, this should be accomplished through reallocation of funding from changes to the TTB. And what did you say, Michael? And other sources if needed?
Yeah, that's fine.
So it keeps it in there, but it says, we think this is important and we think it should be funded this way. Is that through through allocating? I'll just fix this, but does that, Adam, what did you drop in the chat?
Oh, just wondered if it would create more consensus if we said reallocate funding that is, made available by the shifting of responsibilities that we're proposing. Just trying to address G-Day's point, because I generally agree that we shouldn't just slash to slash, but if the city recognizes, like, wow, we don't need X amount of police funding to do this because now this other department does it, at the very least, maybe we can agree we should do that.
It almost gives the kind of why in a way that, we're doing this because, what do you think, folks?
So, I mean, to me, we need to be able to measure that when we get calls for mental health issues out of the police or what have you, that that it doesn't just free them up to answer other things, right? I guess my question is, are there 40 hours, or there, however many hours they're working in a given week, are they consumed? Are they stretched over their limit or what have you, and they're just answering as many as they can? Or is it a situation where if we pull these mental health calls out or we reduce the number of stops, that they're going to have a lot of free time? Because if they're going to have a lot of free time, then I wholly agree that there's going to be plenty of places where, funds could be freed up. So without a definitive answer on that, I think that we're pulling money without knowing, without having a good understanding of what the results may be.
Thoughts? So go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, just again, trying to create consensus. I wonder if, we could put this as something that the continuing task force should look at and say, with the input of the permanent task force, evaluate the extent to which Takoma Park Police Department, funds are freed up due to the shifting of responsibilities and the creation of these new offices, and reallocate those funds if there's some that are available.
Yep, I can certainly add that. I want to look at what I've written here because I'm wondering if we've accomplished this, and if we haven't, tell me what to add. We're saying invest in scholarships, try and do that through reallocating funding by shifting resources away from the police as we've proposed here, comma, and other sources if needed. It seems like we've done everything. We've said this is the goal, do it by defunding here, and then use other sources if needed. But it's a clear indication of shifting and making sure that this thing gets funded one way or another. Does that work? G-Day, give me, G-Day, you would want all of the discussion about reallocation removed from these these two recommendations.
That would be my preference, but I'm fine with what Adam suggested, because at least it's evaluating in my mind whether or not, whether or not we've actually, saved something or freed up cash.
Tell me if this, actually, I might walk this one back because I want to make sure it's getting at the group. What if we pulled out the entire funding piece of this to its own recommendation where we explain this? The above recommendation should be funded by, right? And then add in there that this could be additional work of the task force, or do you want it in each one? So as that would look, it would take this, it would drop it here, and then it would get into the funding. The funding of the above recommendations should be accomplished through the reallocation of funding from changes to the TPPD budget, made available by the shifting of responsibilities away from TPD and other sources if needed. The evaluation, I'm spelling horribly at this, right? Evaluation of, give me the words here, Adam. The evaluation of these funding streams should be an ongoing focus of the task force. Am I getting that anywhere close to right?
Yeah, but you'll let you finish typing and I'll take a look.
Don't read what I'm putting here. It should be a focus of the proposed task force. Shifting non-police functions and responsibilities. Dwayne, I want to make sure I'm putting this in the right place. Made available by the shifting of, got it. I see what you're saying. Yep.
Shifting of yeah. Just to be clear that what you're shifting.
Non-police responsibilities and functions.
Sure.
Yep. Is that what you're saying up there? Yep.
It looks a little more wordy than it needs to be. I think it can just be through looking at the highlighted section through reallocation of funding made available by the shifting. You don't have to say from changes to the TPP budget. I think that's implied.
Dwayne?
Especially because it.
I'm sorry, Adam.
No, I'm realizing that it also says away from TPPD, so that makes it pretty clear.
Just the only other thing I was thinking of with respect to funding and shifting funding is that maybe this is maybe one thing for the more permanent task force to take a look at is alternate ways to fund something like this, such as grants, such as ARP. I'm not sure if that, the American Rescue Plan has funds that could be diverted to something like this, but it's worth looking into, just to give other ways to think about how a program, which we have suggested, and I think it's a really great suggestion, can be funded.
Got it. So did we get there on this one? I think this is actually clear. G-Day, tell me. I thought it was Adam's edit that you wanted in there. Please tell me.
So the way I read this is that the funding for the above recommendation should be accomplished through reallocation of funding made available by the shifting of non-police responsibilities and functions away from Takoma Park Police and other resources if needed. Then there's a little blurb about this should have the evaluation should occur by the proposed task force. But the core recommendation for 42 is still to reallocate funding or whatever without any actual proof that we've, reduce the number of calls for service or that there's a decrease in actual, demand for police services. I guess that's my, it still seems like we're making a recommendation day one that we reallocate funding and then we later reevaluate whether or not that was a good decision. I mean, largely I seem to be in the minority on this one. So
no, but the other way to read this, depending on the intent you're trying to pull out of it, would be that you can't reallocate if the responsibilities and functions haven't been shifted. So the funding is predicated on the shifting of those responsibilities, because otherwise they haven't been made available.
Well, but the entire purpose, the entire assumption in this entire section or whatever assumes that those responsibilities are shifting. Nowhere here does it say that it's contingent on it.
Oh, right. My point is there won't be new resources unless things are shifted. But go ahead, Adam. What were you jumping in on?
Yeah, sorry, I lost my lower hand raise hand function for a second. I was just wondering if it made a difference if we said through reallocation of any funding that is made available or that becomes available. That might be better. Any funding that becomes available, which I think capture what Jide is saying. Maybe.
Jide, does that get closer?
I mean, it's closer. I guess I don't really want to pick at the words or whatever. I mean, is there no way to just throw in contingent someplace? I mean, if we're saying that the funding is, the reallocation should be contingent on an actual, definitive reallocation of resources and duties or what have you, then it shouldn't be problematic, right? Because I guess my question is this: how many police officers does it take to go around all 6 wards, right? How many officers do they need on duty? This to me isn't like New York City where there's, the police force is the size of the Italian army or something. I guess I just don't see them having that many police to begin with. And then they have to cover a 24-hour period. So I don't really know, how many officers are you guys thinking we should be able to get rid of by making these changes? Because that's to me what the question is.
Mm-hmm. Folks, go ahead, Jemana.
I would just point out that there are other expenses as well. There are other expenses that are not officers on duty. And I think it is a question of how many do they need on duty, but there's also a question of what else they're spending their money on, like license plate readers or who knows what else. So just to keep in mind, the budget includes more than personnel.
Yeah, but the bulk of the budget is personnel. But I take your point.
So what I don't know exactly how to solve this one. So what we've done here is we've highlighted that there's a recommendation on investing in scholarships. There's a recommendation on investing in job training programs and a creation of a mentorship program. Those appear as written now to be standalone recommendations. There's then another recommendation that says these should be funded through any reallocation of funding that happens when non-police responsibilities and functions are shifted away from TPVD. Maybe that's it. Maybe I just said it. Any reallocation of any funding that happens when non-police responsibilities and functions happens if/when non-police responsibilities and or functions are shifted away from TPPD and other resources if needed. That adds a bit of that contingency. Jide, am I getting any closer on that one?
No, but we can move on.
Adam?
I mean, I don't want to make Jide feel like he's all alone here, because I get what he's saying. And the other issue is that, we're saying funding that's freed up due to shifting of responsibilities to these other departments, but isn't that funding going to go to those other departments then, and not to these other programs like scholarships? So I'm just, without even saying whether I agree or disagree, I wonder if that's just going to be a head scratcher for the city council. Like we're saying, take the money that you're taking from PPPD to go to community, the neighborhood services or something like that, and also use it to fund scholarships.
Okay. Okay. We could also add a when possible, but that weakens it a bit. So just let me know if there's anything here. What is happening here is there's a defund recommendation and an education recommendation that are being jammed into exactly the same recommendation. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what's happening. And so the question from the task force as a whole and all the comments we got back was, is this a education recommendation? Is this a defunding recommendation, or is it attempting to be both? What I think we've done in this section is say it's both, and here's how that lays out. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but I want to make sure that we're getting any nuance in here that's needed. I'm going to pause for a second on that one, just because I'm aware of the hour, and just scroll through to see if there's anything else we're missing, and we can come back up to that one if there's any questions. Jemana, you said you had, okay, two other quick things here. Kiminori had asked a couple times, we never resolved it. Is there anything we need to add in here about pedestrian and traffic safety? I think at this point, forming a new recommendation isn't prudent, but I just want to make sure we didn't ignore that one. Is there anything, Kiminori, you're thinking we're missing on that one?
No, I think we can just.
And then this one was, as the meeting started, there was some question about, do we want to codify anything about military equipment? It was added just as the meeting started. So I just want to make sure that one is addressed if anyone has questions around it. Anything being proposed there, or are we good on where we're at?
Well, I mean, I don't think that we have any language saying, even if the Takoma Park police aren't presently doing it, that they're not purchasing it. You know, we should say, hey, if you're not purchasing it, great, make sure you continue not purchasing that equipment. Or, you know, at bare minimum, that the city council has, you know, some say in that.
So are you proposing a new recommendation around that, Jide?
I absolutely am.
Got it. We're going to need this. No, I'm rubbing my eyes because we can't just drop it in after the document's been shared, right? So what we'll need to do, if there's agreement here to do that, let's craft the language, and then it's going to have to go back out to the full task force and say, we have 3 items, right? We need you to say, if you're give us your vote on these 3 items, and then look at this proposed new recommendation, and let me know if you're good with it. And then if there are edits, we can do it over email. Completely doable. Just want to make sure that everyone's comfortable with that process. Can you help me draft? Can someone help me draft what the recommendation is here?
I'm drafting something right now.
Thank you, Ashmel. Then I'll send that around. That's perfect. Jumana, you said you had one other edit in the document. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the other item I had, it was a small thing. It was further up under the headline was end police traffic stops for low level offenses.
Yep.
I'm
going up. Anyone remember exactly that is? I remember that one. I'll find it.
Just up on me when you scroll, but the language in there said for which a stop is not mandatory under state law. We had this conversation and with several people, but like, even if it says shall, there's still discretion of policing. There's always discretion of policing. And I am not comfortable with that language. Like, my intent there was to instruct them to be not be pursuing that, to not be focused on taillights and, you know, excuse me, like other, you know, seatbelts and other minor infractions. And even if it says shall, that does not mean that every time you see that you have to pull someone over, or that they do. And I think we put this language in, it makes it sound like they should keep doing it. And I just don't like the way the language ended up.
Give me the edit to it, Jumana.
I think, let's see. Okay, so I was looking at the chat and it was not this. I think, you know, the language is that basically the Takoma Park Police should use their discretion to end police traffic stops for low-level offenses. I mean, you can talk about, I would list some, but you could talk about they can develop guidance. I mean, I do think some of them are obvious, and I think it should be things like taillights and seatbelts and, you know, basically anything that is not threatening the safety of people.
I don't remember who this one or what committee this came from. So does that work? Are there thoughts on that one?
We had talked about it in our committee, but I think another committee talked about it too.
This one's mine. And I'm sorry, I'm not using the hand raise function.
I'm terribly offended.
Sorry. I cut Dwayne off. I cut Dwayne off too before. All right, this one was mine. It says that CPD shall use their discretion to end. Yeah, that's fine. I like Jumana's language, gives it a breath that mine didn't have before.
Got it. I'm gonna scroll down here to drop in language that Ajmal came up with. Takoma Park Police Department does not currently participate in the federal 1033 program or otherwise purchase military equipment for use. The task force recommends the department continue to follow this prohibition.
I would add to that.
Yep.
And also not use department funds to buy military equipment, because that's the workaround. They can go buy it anytime they want, without the 1033 program, or I would say 1033 or affiliated programs. There's also Homeland Security programs and others.
Do we want to add it up here, and affiliated programs?
And other federal programs that I guess you have otherwise purchased military equipment fees, but yeah, I would say other federal programs that transfer military equipment to civilian police departments.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's add in a second clause. It's going to be does not currently participate in the federal 1033 program or other federal
programs that transfer military equipment to civilian police departments, law enforcement agencies, or whatever, however you want to.
Yep.
Military equipment.
Military equipment to law enforcement agencies.
Civilian law enforcement agencies. And I think it needs to say military equipment, because then the argument comes back, well, sometimes we send microwaves and computers, and nobody's really objecting to that. So you think I'm joking. I've heard that argument a lot.
I get it. So. I get it. To civilian law enforcement agencies. Got it. Oh, okay. So what I will do with this one, Dwayne, I'm coming to you next, sir. What I will do with this one, once we get any more comments, we'll just add this as this has been added. Please let us know your thoughts on it. Go ahead, Dwayne.
Yeah, I just wanted, I'm sorry, I just unmuted myself.
Oh, yeah,
I just wanted to raise, I had something in the chat that I wanted to raise for folks. And I mean, I know it's late, and it'd probably be something that needs to go to the full task force. But I wanted to address something related to civil asset forfeiture. That's a problematic program that primarily affects, Black and brown people. But I mean, it affects people all over. But the police come in without probable cause, maybe even without reasonable suspicion, stop people, and on the pretense that whatever assets that they may have with them are related to drugs or drug dealing, or that those assets are then seized, and those assets are then used by the police to sometimes supplement their budget, and it causes people to. I mean, there are plenty of stories out there where individuals have lost money related to, businesses that they were using to transport between their businesses, to start a business, so on and so forth. It's a program that's been abused greatly, and I'd like to ensure that civil asset forfeiture is not something that the Takoma police use or engage in. I have no idea whether they do or not. So the recommendation probably could include something along the lines of the task force. I'm sorry, the council should review practices related to the use of civil asset for forfeiture, and moving forward prohibit its and I'm grabbing here, but prohibit its use by the police, Takoma Park Police Department. Because again, it's not something that we had an opportunity to get information from with respect to Chief Duval, but if it is used, I would like to see it not used by our jurisdiction.
Yep, civil asset forfeiture, and recommends not what you're going for, and prohibit.
Yeah.
Prohibit its use by. So what we can do on this one, I'm going to need goals for both of these just to make sure it fits the format. So folks can give me those quickly in the chat while we're doing a quick scroll through of the overall report. That would be super helpful, or email them to me. I need to get these out tonight after the meeting, so folks have an opportunity to review. The other thing we'll do, Dwayne, with your permission, is we'll seek clarity from Takoma Park on if they have any sort of policy around this already. And if they do, the recommendation will be, memorialize this through the city council to make sure it happens in the future. And if they don't, the recommendation will be that this should be prohibited. Does that work? Okay, perfect. We will do that. Great. And Ajmal, I got the goal here. Perfect. Dwayne, you gave me the goal for this wonderfully, and your verbalness. If you could type something out or just give me something to drop in here as the goal, I think that's enough to get it out. Michael, go ahead. What is the question here? Is that an issue in the in Takoma Park. I know it was limited in Maryland by the legislator about 5 years ago. Any insights on that?
Yeah, just if it is an issue, we should put it there. I just wasn't sure to what extent it's an issue. That's all.
Got it. So we'll drop in a goal. We'll get clarity on if there are any policies and procedures around it, and then we'll send it around. Perfect. Thank you, G-Day. That was 2019. So this Hogan's. So this one is saying that it cannot be. So this is saying that in Maryland, you can't do this. Is that what this is saying, G-Day?
Sorry, I had to switch back to the view. I was just sending the document. I haven't had a chance to actually read the law.
Got it. I will read that as well, and then I can I can form a question to the city around it, see if we can get an answer back quickly, so that we can provide this, and we can do that in an email and see where folks are on that. Excellent. We are wildly over time. I want to just very quickly, Molly, can you share screen and just very quickly show folks how the appendix is landing so that folks have seen it before it comes to them tomorrow? So in this report,
I got the wrong one.
This is the report you've seen, and all of the edits that have been made to it have been incorporated. We've been cleaning it up. There are 3 added sections that we want to show you here. One of them is the what happens after this language, and that was requested by the council member to put in there that this now goes to council. Council will do this. Council needs to be working with the community on it going forward. So we will show you that piece, but go ahead, Molly.
Yeah, so walking through this kind of all is similar. There's some additional, Ajmal, I believe, went through, made some word choice comments. Walking through this here goes over the timeline. The piece that Michael mentioned changing is this sort of research and resources. So it looks like new text, we just wrote it in a separate document. Basically outlines the extensive research that you all reviewed. So all of those reports are mentioned here, as well as some of the materials provided by the chief and the city in the past couple weeks, as well as the focus groups and the data from the police department. So there's just a little bit more detail here to talk about the level of data that you all reviewed and received, as well as the subject matter experts. So adding that in as the research component instead of keeping it as separate. And then we moved that list of names of those subject matter experts to the appendix. And then the other piece that we added in is that community engagement note. I believe Michael Rubin, you requested that. We sent it around for everyone to take a look at. It just compiles the list of stakeholder interviews, the business walk, the focus groups are kind of detailed and outlined. We did go back through and add the attendees from those listening sessions. So have a little more detail there, and it's good context to be included kind of as you're looking at this comprehensive picture and report. And all of that is going to be on the website and in the appendix of the report. And then just the other piece that, so there's a space here to drop in those recommendations after Michael sends kind of the updated after conversations today. And then we added in here kind of this next steps piece. So this doesn't end, right? This is the beginning, and then we'll end up working with the city. This is kind of the first step, the first piece to say, how will these recommendations be implemented? Thinking about the priority, the ordering. I know that's been brought up a couple of times. So just calling attention to that this doesn't end, but now the work begins to see how these become part of how they're used in Takoma Park. So then the appendix, let me just get to all of these materials. In the past couple of days, Donna, the city has been working avidly to make sure everything's up on the website. So the application, that summary that kind of mentioned who applied and how many applications were received, all of the bios that live on the website are all here, all of your bios. If you don't see yours and you would like yours to be listed, please send that to us and we can add that in there. And then we will be putting the focus groups that are in process of being uploaded to the website. And then all of that research lives now on the Takoma Park website, so that it can be accessed by anyone looking to engage with these materials. And then the subject matter experts that, like I mentioned, we listed down here. And then all of the public comments received are posted as well. And this kind of recreates what the website is with the agenda, the meeting minutes, as well as the slides from each of the meetings and the recorded sessions. We have these graphics here at the end as well to be something a little more visual, and that is a lot. I see Jide's hand, as well as I know the chat has some comments.
Got it. Let's go to Jide and then we'll summarize the chat comments. Go ahead, sir.
Sorry, it was just about that funding thing. Can we put that one to a vote as well? I'm not sure if that was captured.
Yes,
and then,
sir.
I guess one last thing. I had also, I thought I inquired about the viability of recommending that more focus groups be conducted and to provide that information to future task forces. Like I said, I found it helpful to hear what some of that 2018 focus group or what have you, I found that information useful, and trying to hear from groups that traditionally don't have the opportunity to attend sessions like this. So I thought that would be helpful to future groups.
Yep. Jide, what if we include some language around that in that section on public engagement? So this is what happened. And then note, based on task force feedback, in future efforts, special efforts should be made to focus group populations that might not be comfortable or able to participate in the larger process, something like that. So we put it in there as a specific recommendation for future process.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Great. I know Carol has captured that and we will get that in there. Let's make sure the dispatch tour area is in that engagement list. That's excellent. Team, are link numbers in the attendance numbers? If they are, we should back those out, obviously.
They've been removed from that list.
I would assume as much. So I appreciate
that.
That.
There were fewer people certainly in the final one. I saw 4 community members, I believe. And there was, I think, a city council member on, but that they didn't say anything. And I know on one meeting we had the new city manager was kind of listening, but wasn't really community input, really. It was just, the number of people who spoke was very few. So that's all.
Okay, Michael, we'll go back and look. We've been pulling from the recordings themselves, but we'll go back and make sure those are all accurate. Absolutely. There's certainly no attempt to inflate. 8 is not a great number of participants either. If it, right?
I know that. My only point was that it's a relatively small number of people overall participated in this process. That was the only point I was trying to make.
Yeah, I also just, I don't want in any way the task force to downplay the amount of work and engagement that went into this. Don't, talk anyone out of the recommendations you're making, because they're really powerful. This is a much more a public process than many task forces, as we've heard from our guest speakers. Second thing in here, there are a couple new things in what Molly just shared, just so we all know. The focus group reports to this point, I do not believe have been broadly public, including the police focus group reports. The city has cleared that those can be included. Clearly, all personally identifiable information has been removed, and we told participants that we would not use personally identifiable information. So nothing is being violated there. But I do think they were a very substantive use of information for the task force in shaping some of these recommendations. So I think it's a positive thing that broad information will be out there. What else? Michael, are we doing an evaluation of this task force? In what way, sir?
Just in terms of what we thought of the process, what maybe other members thought of, and just in terms of improving. If we're going to recommend that we have an ongoing task force, I think we should look at the process, what worked, what didn't work, that kind of thing. So even if it's just a little survey that we fill out or some such thing, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I sorry for the tone. I thought you meant, are we doing that now? And I was like,
No, I meant like, is that part of,
yeah,
because I know this is our final meeting, so I want to make sure it's like out there that we do something. That's all.
No, absolutely. Our contract with the city ended back on July 1st. So we will
I understand.
If you want. Absolutely. We can, I think a survey is a really good idea. And let's work with the city so that that becomes kind of a standard process for these so that it can be used in future processes. I like that a lot. Okay. That's a really good suggestion. Let's add that and we'll get that done as well. Last thing, and Jamal, I know you were covering this around the goals for Tuesday night. The short update is we're still waiting for some guidance around the council on exactly how they expect that to go. But we do know that we have the entire evening. This is not being put in with other agenda items. This is the agenda item, which I think will be good. And there's a goal and hope and expectation that the full task force is available for that. Jamal, other details that you'd like to share at this point?
Yeah, no, Michael, I think as we're figuring out the full details, I think one of the things that we should be ready to present on is really to talk about the recommendations and the goals and what we're coming up with, and really addressing some of those nuances that and we heard from Councilwoman Searcy around some of these nuances and talking through what are some of those recommendations that are most urgent and things that we need to kind of achieve in the next month, 2 months, 3 months, or what are some of those things that are a longer term that take some time to focus on the things that requires consistency around the recommendation. So as you all are reading the final recommendations and reports, start thinking through ideas and ways that that we can have a conversation with the city council around the implementation of them, and then thinking through what are some of the ones that are ongoing. So think through those and please provide any feedback as we move to final stage. Michael, anything else to add? And I think we'll follow up once we get more details around what's needed for Tuesday.
Absolutely. And we'll do that over email. Kiminori, I see your note. You had in the last version, let me pull it up. You had asked that question and there was a discussion at the end of the meeting around it that I moved per where I thought we landed on that into a part of the report. But let me just pull up my track changes to make sure that we've addressed that one.
Well, not just the, under police, over police thing. That was, I guess, became part of the goal. But, that's a kind of, this racial inequalities part is part of the emphasis of this task force. So make sure that's addressed in, ideally, every single one of those recommendations.
Yeah. So you're talking about in the framing for the overall report.
Right.
Yeah. Got it.
Like we're shifting, police functions this way, that way, like because, without those shifting, racial disparities are generated.
Got it. So what I'm going to do, in addition to sending around the updated recommendations with the questions, we'll also send around the latest version of the report that Molly shared. It may not be the version with all the live links because those are still being updated, but we can at least make sure the text is out there with that included. And if anyone has feedback on that, go ahead and get it to us. So what I will do as soon as we end tonight is I will update the recommendations document and draft an email making very clear where we need task force feedback before tomorrow. And then we will we'll figure out where those numbers come out and send around an updated version around that. We'll then put the entire process through the entire document through a quality control process to make sure we're catching formatting, editing, grammar, etc., with a goal of having updated versions to everyone for tomorrow. Councilmember Searcy and Councilmember Siemens have they asked for the final versions by noon, which is not going to be possible given the additions tonight. So we will convey that to them this evening. We'll work to get feedback from folks throughout the day tomorrow, and then give kind of the final version to them for consideration and sharing while it goes through a QC before the final version is done. And then the goal is also to have all of this stuff posted by tomorrow so that there's a time for public review before the council meeting. Okay. Perfect. thank you for the engagement. Let us get working on this email. We'll send it around and we'll go from there. Very much appreciated. Thank you all.